We've done it. Look at us. Streaming away like we know what we're doing. Pretending as though we have any clue what's happening in the world. How y'all doing today? Today's an exciting day for me. I got my dog back. He's snoozing off in the corner, so I won't bother him. But he's such a sweet little guy. Now I'm talking, and he's like, is he talking to me? He must be talking to me. There's no one else here. So assume barks in the future. Outside of that, man, just chilling like a villain. This audiobook that I'm recording is clipping along really nicely. Getting to the point now where I've got to like unplug my fridge. Glory be and mercy me, we've done it yet again. Hi DM, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Oh yeah. I don't know, honestly, things on my end are kind of calm. Beautiful, snowy sort of a day, right? Got that lovely kind of magical fluffiness. And I really think to myself how fortunate I am, you know? And I am one of the lucky ones. I really am. That the universe seems to have conspired to allow me to isolate during this period of time, right? That there are people out in the world, and I see them when I leave my domicile to go for my usual walk, right? There are people driving around, right? There's people who are going off working these jobs that no one should work. JC genocide, yee. Hey, you hoser, yak yelder, you yak yelder. What's a yak yelder? That's a wonderful great. I don't know if I've ever seen you here before, JC, unless you're just JC with a different name. But glad to see you, all the same. Yeah, you know, it does feel nice. It does feel nice to go out for a walk, especially you get the long johns on, right? Like you get nice and bundled up, and then you go for a walk in the cold. I've been thinking recently about shaving my beard. And then I go out in the cold and I feel the cold on like my forehead and my cheeks, and I think, nah, this is okay. I'm gonna hang on to the beard for at least until after winter is over. Ren and Stimpy, classic. Ren and Stimpy is absolutely classic, right? Like happy joy happy joy happy joy happy joy happy joy happy joy happy. Just like a brilliant critique of consumerist society from back in the 90s is Ren and Stimpy, right? It's idiotic. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's definitely full of the absolute stupidest moments ever. But, you know, that's okay, right? One would assume that a show that's supposed to be a critique of consumer society and a critique of the society at large would end up being kind of stupid, because the society that it is critiquing is, in fact, also incredibly stupid. Like, who is Stimpy except, like, the average American and Canadian voter, right? Who is Ren except, like, the flip side coin? Like, the people who are angry and frustrated at what's going on in the world, and then the people who are just sort of affably walking around as if nothing is wrong whatsoever. And the two, how they interact with one another is absolutely brilliant. And then like all of the like constant consumerism that exists within the show, which the apex of it was for sure happy joy. Like although Log is right up there too, right? It rolls downstairs and loner in pairs, rolls over your neighbor's dog. It's great for a snack and fits on your back. It's log. It's log. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's log. It's better than bad, it's good. Everyone loves a log. Come on and buy a log. Right? Like that's peak consumerism right there. Just like, we will sell you literally everything. And I think one of my favorite aberrations of this idea of like the consumerist society is the pet rock, right? That like back in the 70s, someone literally like took a rock, put googly eyes on it, put it in a package and sold it to people. And it like became it became a phenomenon throughout the 70s, pet rock. And the guy that started it was like literally like, no one's like, this is ridiculous. Like, our society can't be this dumb. But then it became one of those things where people were buying into the idea of like so they were like buying it ironically in order to kind of make fun of the idea of consumerism. Powdered Toast Man, absolutely oddity. Powdered Toast Man's great. Oh, don't worry about the sub count fluctuating, DM. It does that. I just assume that it's like, you know, the bean count. I don't think it's people subbing and then up-subbing. Like, I don't think that's what it is. I really do think it's just like the system sort of figuring itself out. I used to get like really kind of, oh god, like it's up and then down and up and then down. Oh my god, are people like subscribing? And then like, are there people subscribing, then people leaving and all kind of, I don't think so. I think it's literally as simple as someone subscribes and then like there's a component of the thing that like sees that they've subscribed. It's like every time I upload YouTube, it like notifies me, right? New subscribers have been notified. And then but then like I click on it and I'm like, okay, great. And then I like reload up YouTube later on in the day and they're like notifications, and it's the exact same notifications. So like there's things not quite connecting in the system, I think. And I also believe very strongly that every so often I'll upload something that is that like liberals will get on board with, right? I've noticed this especially when I upload like music. When I upload like I like do a piece of music and maybe I'll do like a music video thing associated with it, and I'll upload that, and that gets me like a healthy amount of subscribers usually, and then I'll lose about half of those subscribers because they realize pretty quickly that I think liberals are shit. And if you're a liberal, right, you can, you know, you'll buy into, oh, wow, music. Oh, wow, yeah. Hey, you're telling me a revolution, right? Because liberals think that, like, voting for liberals is revolutionary, right? Like, they think that, like, incremental reform, that's somehow a revolution against, you know, the structure of the society. And when they actually start hearing, like, oh, like, this guy actually is interested in a legitimate form of revolution. Like, this guy's interested in revolution in a legitimate way. They start to bail because they're liberals, right? They're weak. They're dumb. They don't actually believe in anything. They genuinely think that like, oh yeah, like we should fight for people's right to be gay and work for a billionaire for the rest of their lives, right? Like, this is literally how they think. And once they start to realize that like, oh, this guy thinks that I'm stupid, they bail. So I've started to call that baiting liberals. Like, and I'll upload a video and I'll know, like, yeah, I'm going to get some liberals with this one. And so I don't worry about it anymore, right? I upload it, my subscriber count goes up a bit, and then it declines. And I'm like, yep, those are the liberals, the worthless losers who think it's completely fine to have a gay slave, right? Like, that's exactly... Yeah, I mean, at this point, especially, like, Aaron O'Toole's conservatives, like, the only thing, in my view, that seems to distinguish Aaron O'Toole's conservatives from liberals is that Aaron O'Toole, his incremental reformism is slightly worse, right? Like, he'll stand up and be like, I think that the incremental reformism of the liberals is too ambitious. Our incremental reformism should be slightly worse. Right? Like that, and that seems to be the only real true difference. That and the conservatives just keep putting their foot, you know, like Aaron O'Toole came out and said outright and explicitly in front of people that, oh, the residential school system started with good intentions. Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, bro, like that's super easy to falsify. Like really, really easy to falsify that claim. You know? Well, oh, here's the guy who pushed for the initiative of the residential school system saying the goal of this is to eliminate the Indian. Started with good intentions. Yeah, and exactly. Corporate duopoly. It's Democrats, Republicans. Man, you're really reaching for those ones, eh? But I love it. I love it all the same. I love puns. I every so often I find myself on TikTok And if somebody just says a pun on TikTok and that's the whole thing, I'm like, liked, followed, instantly. I just can't even help myself. Yep. Because, like, I don't know, puns, they're the best. They're the best. Even a bad pun is good, right? Like, and if somebody reacts to it by going like, oh, like, that's perfect. And if somebody reacts to it by going like, ha, that's perfect. You can't lose with a pun. You can't. They're always good. Even bad puns are great, right? I love them. Hey Jay, how you doing? Good to see you. Oh wow, we got a lot of Jays in the chat now. Like my whole chat is just gonna be a stream of Jays. All right, that's fine. It's the J chat today. All right, guys, I think there's enough of you in here. Let's first of all, hi boss. Sorry I'm late. We're calendar year 3 into a pandemic, and none of this shit matters. Like, that's the thing that really kills me about what's going on these days, right? Like, I want to report on, like, news events as they occur and things like this, but none of it fucking matters. It's all just, like, it's like killing time in the midst of the apocalypse, you know? Like, it really is. Like, you can report on things all you want, but it's just, like, picking up the, like, little tiny thing. It's like, how badly do I really want to kill time while the comet is coming, right? Like, we're looking at the comet, here it comes, and it's like, hey, did you guys hear that somebody stole a Pepsi? And you're like, nobody gives, like, fuck, who cares about that shit? And it's just like, more and more I'm beginning to see people have these expressions of like, wait a minute, this is so irrelevant. Like, all of this shit that these capitalists are having us do is, like, beyond irrelevant. It really is like they're just trying to get us to, like, kill time until the comet hits, right? Like, that's really how it feels. And I just, like, refuse. I just refuse to participate in this asinine bullshit. Because it's just asinine at this point. Oh, here we go. We got people picking the numbers, so let's move on. Okay, we got a 1, we got a 2. I'm going with a 10. I'm going big. Feeling 10. Today's a 10 today.
Here we go for
Great, powerful
today's
David
number.
Lynch.
It's January 11,
What do we got?
2022.
What do we got?
10 balls.
10 balls.
Each ball has a number.
I love it. Gonna walk the girls.
Numbers 1
I'm
through
beyond
10.
upset. I got no sleep. Oh, sorry to hear that pissed off.
Swirl
the numbers. Here we go. We got another 9. Got some 7s. I know Mark would pick a 7.
number.
Here we go. Drum roll, please.
Today's number is
3.
3.
Whiff. Threaded that needle right on through. Nope. No winner today. I'm also going to forego the music today. My voice, for whatever reason, like, it's not hurt, but I can tell it's, like, right on that threshold, and I really can't afford that right now. Like, I'm in the middle of an audiobook project. I finally have got everything working. I'm finally uploading, like, files that the system is accepting, and, like, I feel like I've got some momentum. And now I've got my little dog back, and he's going to be all snorty and snory, and so, like, I got to really make sure. The last thing I want to do is hurt my voice and have to, like, hold back and all that kind of stuff. It'd be so fucking terrible. I hope I make a bunch of money. Wouldn't that be cool if I, like, uploaded this, like, audiobook and I actually uploaded and, like, it actually sold and I made a bunch of money? Wouldn't that be nice? I'd feel good about myself. I feel really good about myself. All right. From Time Magazine. Today is going to be a really Time Magazine sort of heavy cast, actually, because Time has come out with some interesting articles, and there's some interesting things to respond to. Top 1% of Americans have taken 50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the U.S. less secure. Let's see why they think it's made the U.S. less secure. So first of all, this is written by Nick Hanur, right? He's an entrepreneur and venture capitalist, the founder of public policy incubator Civic Ventures, and the host of the podcast Pitchfork Economics. And David M. Rolfe, who's a founder and president emeritus of SEIU 775 and the author of The Fight for 15. Like many of the virus's hardest hit victims, the United States went into the COVID-19 pandemic racked by pre-existing conditions: a fraying public health infrastructure, inadequate medical supplies, an employer-based health insurance system perversely unsuited to the moment. These and other afflictions are surely contributing to the death toll. But in addressing the causes and consequences of this pandemic and its cruelly uneven impact, the elephant in the room is extreme income inequality. How big is this elephant? A staggering $50 trillion. That is how much the upward redistribution of income has cost American workers over the past several decades. This is not some back-of-the-napkin approximation. According to a groundbreaking new working paper by Carter C. Price and Catherine Edwards of the Rand Corporation, had the more equitable income distribution of the 3 decades following World War II, 1945 through 1974, merely held steady, the aggregate annual income of Americans earning below the 90th percentile would have been 2.5 trillion higher in the year 2018 alone. That is an amount equal to nearly 12% of GDP, enough to more than double median income, enough to pay every single working American in the bottom 9 deciles an additional $1,144 a month, every single year. Price and Edwards calculate that the cumulative tab for our 4-decade-long experiment in radical inequality had grown to over 47 trillion from 1975 through 2018, a recent pace of about 2.7 trillion a year. That number, we estimate, crossed the 50 trillion mark by early 2020. That 50 trillion that would have gone into the paychecks of working Americans had inequality held constant. 50 trillion that would have built a far larger and more prosperous economy. 50 trillion that would have enabled the vast majority of Americans to enter this pandemic far more healthy, resilient, and financially secure. As the Rand report, whose research was funded by the Fair Work Center, which co-author David Rolfe is a board member of, demonstrates, a rising tide most definitely did not lift all boats. It didn't even lift most of them, as nearly all of the benefits of growth these past 45 years were captured by those at the very top. And as the American economy grows radically unequal, it is holding back economic growth itself. Even inequality is meted out unequally. Low-wage workers and their families, disproportionately people of color, suffer from far higher rates of asthma, hypertension, diabetes, and other COVID-19 comorbidities. Yet they are also far less likely to have health insurance, and far more likely to work in essential industries, with the highest rates of coronavirus exposure and transmission. It is no surprise then, according to the CDC, that COVID-19 inflicts a disproportionate burden of illness and death among racial and ethnic minority groups. But imagine how much safer, healthier, and empowered all American workers might be if that 50 trillion had been paid out in wages instead of being funneled into corporate profits and the offshore accounts of the super rich. Imagine how much richer and more resilient the American people would be. Imagine how many more lives would have been saved had our people been more resilient. It is easy to see how such a deadly virus and the draconian measures required to contain it might spark an economic depression. But look straight into the eyes of the elephant in the room, and it is impossible to deny the many ways in which our extreme inequality, an exceptionally American affliction, has made the virus more deadly and its economic consequences more dire than in any rate so staggering than any other advanced nation. Why is our death toll so high and our unemployment rate so staggeringly off the charts? Why was our nation so unprepared and our economy so fragile? Why have we lacked the stamina and the will to contain the virus like most other advanced nations? The reason is staring us in the face. A stampede of rising inequality that has been trampling the lives and livelihoods of the vast majority of Americans year after year after year. Of course, America's chronic case of extreme inequality is old news. Many other studies have documented this trend, chronicled its impact, and analyzed its causes. But where others have painted the picture in terms of aggregate shares of GDP, productivity growth, or other cold, hard statistics, the RAND report brings the inequality price tag directly home by denominating it in dollars, not just the aggregate 50 trillion figure, but the granular demographic detail. For example, are you a typical black man earning $35,000 a year? You are being paid at least $26,000 a year less than you would have had income distributions held constant. Are you a college-educated, prime-aged, full-time worker earning $72,000, not $72,000 of course, depending on the inflation index used? Rising inequality is costing you between $48,000 and $63,000 a year. But whatever your race, gender, educational attainment, urbanicity, or income, the data show if you earn below the 90th percentile, the relentlessly upward redistribution of income since 1975 is coming out of your pocket. As Price and Edwards explain, from 1947 through 1974, real incomes grew close to the rate of per capita economic growth across all income levels. That means that for 3 decades, those at the bottom and middle of the distribution saw their incomes grow at about the same rate as those at the top. This was the era in which America built the world's largest and most prosperous middle class, an era in which inequality between income groups steadily shrank, even as shocking inequalities between the sexes and races largely remained. But around 1975, this extraordinary era of broadly shared prosperity came to an end. Since then, the wealthiest Americans, particularly those in the top 1% and 0.1%, have managed to capture an ever larger share of our nation's economic growth. In fact, almost all of it. Their real incomes skyrocketing as the vast majority of Americans saw little, if any, gains. What if American prosperity had continued to be broadly shared? How much more would a typical worker be earning today? Once the data are compiled, answering these questions is fairly straightforward. Price and Edwards look at real taxable income from 1975 to 2018. They then compare actual income distributions in 2018 to a counterfactual that assumes incomes had continued to keep pace with growth in per capita gross domestic product, a 118% increase over the 1975 income numbers. Whether measuring inflation using the more conservative personal consumption expenditures price index or the more commonly cited consumer price index for all urban consumers, the results are striking. Here's some numbers and data for you. At every income level up to the 90th percentile, wage earners are now being paid a fraction of what they would have had inequality held constant. For example, at the median individual income of $36,000, workers are being shortchanged by $21,000 a year, $28,000 when using the CPI, an amount equivalent to an additional $10.10 to $13.50 an hour. But according to Price and Edwards, this actually understates the impact of rising inequality on low and middle income workers, because much of the gains at the bottom of the distribution were largely driven by an increase in hours, not an increase in wages. To adjust for this, along with changing patterns of workforce participation, the researchers repeated their analysis for full-year, full-time, prime-aged workers, aged 25 to 54. These results are even more stark. Unlike the growth patterns in the 50s and 60s, Wright, Price, and Edwards, the majority of full-time workers did not share in the economic growth of the last 40 years. On average, extreme inequality is costing the medium income full-time worker about $42,000 a year. Adjusted for inflation using the CPI, the numbers are even worse. Half of all full-time workers, those at or below the median income of $50,000 a year, now earn less than half what they would have had incomes across the distribution continued to keep pace with economic growth. And that's per worker, not per household. At both the 25th and 50th percentiles, households comprised of a married couple with one full-time worker earned thousands of dollars less in 2018 dollars than a comparable household in 1975, and 50,000 and 66,000 less respectively than if inequality had held constant, a predicament compounded by the rising costs of maintaining a dignified middle-class life. According to Orrin Cass, executive director of the conservative think tank American Compass, the median male worker needed 30 weeks of income in 1985 to pay for housing, healthcare, transportation, and education for his family. By 2018, that cost of thriving index had increased to 53 weeks, more weeks than in an actual year. But the counterfactual reveals an even starker picture. In 2018, the combined income of married household with two full-time workers was barely more than what the income of a single earner household would have earned had inequality held constant. Two-income families are now working twice the hours to maintain a shrinking share of the pie, while struggling to pay housing, healthcare, education, childcare, and transportation costs that have grown at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation. This dramatic redistribution of income from the majority of workers to those at the very top is so complete that even at the 95th percentile, most workers are still earning less than they would have had inequality held constant. It is only at the 99th percentile that we see incomes growing faster than economic growth. At 171% of the rate of per capita GDP, but even this understates the disparity. The average income growth for the top 1% was substantially higher, writes Price and Edwards, at more than 300% of the real per capita GDP rate. The higher your income, the larger your percentage gains. As a result, the top 1%'s share of total taxable income has more than doubled, from 9% in 1975 to 22% in 2018, while the bottom 90% have seen their income share fall from 67% to 50%. This represents a direct transfer of income and, over time, wealth from the vast majority of working Americans to a handful at the very top. But given the changing demographic composition of the U.S. workforce, these top-line numbers can only tell part of the story. The U.S. workforce is now better educated and more urban than it was in 1975. It is also far less white and male, with white men falling from over 60% of the prime-age workforce in 1974 to less than 45% by 2018. These changes are important because while there was far more equality between the income distributions in 1975, there were also more inequality within them, notably in regard to gender and race. For example, in 1975, the median income of white women was only 31% of that of white women, or white men rather. In 2018, white women were earning 68% as much. Likewise, the median income of black men as a share of their white counterparts' earning rose from 74% in 1975 to 80% in 2018. Clearly, income disparities between races, and especially between men and women, have narrowed since 1975, and that is a good thing. But unfortunately, much of the narrowing we see is more of an artifact of 4 decades of flat or declining wages for low and middle income white men than that it is of substantial gains for women and non-whites. Much has been made about white male grievance in the age of Trump, and given their falling or stagnant real incomes, one can understand why some white men might feel aggrieved. White, non-urban, non-college educated men have the slowest wage growth in every demographic category. But to blame their woes on competition from women or minorities would be to completely miss the target. In fact, white men still earn more than white women at all income distributions, and substantially more than most non-white men and women. Only Asian American men earn higher, yet there is no moral or practical justification for the persistence of any income disparity based on race or gender. The counterfactuals in the table above appear vastly unequal because they extrapolate from the indefensible 1975 levels of race and gender inequality. They assume that inequality remained constant, both between income distributions and within them, that women and non-whites had not narrowed the income gap with white men. But surely this cannot be our goal. In an economy freed from race and gender bias, and that shares the fruits of growth broadly across all income distributions, the most appropriate counterfactual for all groups in this table would be the aggregate counterfactual for all groups. A median income of $57,000 a year for all adults with positive earnings. That would be the income for all workers at the 50th percentile, regardless of race or gender. Had race and gender inequality within distributions been eliminated, and inequality between distributions not grown. By this measure, we can see that in real dollars, women and non-whites have actually lost more income to rising inequality than white men, because starting from their disadvantaged positions in 1975, they had far more to potentially gain. Per capita GDP grew by 118% over the following 4 decades. So there was plenty of new income to spread around. That the majority of white men have benefited from almost none of this growth isn't because they have lost income to women or minorities, it's because they've lost it to their largely white male counterparts in the top 1%, who have captured nearly all of the income growth for themselves. According to economists Thomas Piketty, men accounted for 85% of the top income centile in the mid-2010s. And while he doesn't specify, these men are overwhelmingly white. Thus, by far the single driver of rising inequality in the past 40 years has been the dramatic rise in equality between white men. The data on income distribution by educational attainment is equally revealing, in that it calls the lie on the notion of a skills gap, a dominant narrative that has argued that rising inequality is largely a consequence of a majority of American workers failing to acquire the higher skills necessary to compete in our modern global economy. If workers were better educated, this narrative argues, they would earn more money. Problem solved. Indeed, at every income distribution, the education premium has increased since 1975, with the income of college graduates rising faster than their less educated counterparts. But this growing gap is more a consequence of falling incomes for workers without a college degree than it is of rising real incomes for most workers with one. For not only have workers without a degree secured none of the gains from 4 decades of economic growth, below the 50th percentile, they've actually seen their real incomes decline. College-educated workers are doing better. The median real income for full-time workers with a 4-year degree has grown from $55,000 a year in 1975 to $72,000 in 2018. But that still falls short of the $120,000 they'd be earning had incomes grown with per capita GDP. Even at the 90th percentile, a college-educated full-time worker making $191,000 a year is earning less than 78% of what they would have had inequality held constant. The reality is that American workers have never been more highly educated. In 1975, only 67% of the adult U.S. workforce had a high school education or better, while just 15% had earned a 4-year college degree. By 2018, 91% of adult workers had completed high school, while the percentage of college graduates in the workforce had more than doubled to 34%. In raw numbers, the population of adult workers with a high school education or less has fallen since 1975, while the number of workers with a 4-year degree has more than quadrupled. It is impossible to argue that a skills gap is responsible for rising income inequality when the rate of educational attainment is rising faster than the rate of growth in productivity or per capita GDP. Yes, workers with college degrees are doing better than those without. The economy we've built over the past 45 years has been more unequal to some than to others. But below the 90th percentile, even college graduates are falling victim to a decades-long trend of radical inequality that is robbing them of most of the benefits of economic growth. The iron rule of market economies is that we all do better when we all do better. When workers have more money, businesses have more customers and hire more workers. 70% of our economy is dependent on consumer spending. The faster and broader real incomes grow, the stronger the demand for the products and services American businesses produce. This is the virtuous cycle through which workers and businesses prospered together in the decades immediately following World War II. But as wages stagnated after 1975, so too did consumer demand. And as demand slowed, so did the economy. A 2014 report from the OECD estimated that rising income inequality knocked as much as 9 points off of U.S. GDP growth over the previous 2 decades. A deficit that has surely grown over the past 6 years as inequality continued to climb. That's about $2 trillion worth of GDP that's being frittered away, year after year, through policy choices that intentionally constrain the earning power of American workers. COVID-19 may have triggered our current crisis, but it wasn't its only cause. For even had our political leaders done everything right in the moment, our response to the pandemic would still have been mired in the footprint of extreme inequality. A $50 trillion upward redistribution of wealth and income, $297,000 per household that has left our families, our economy, and our democracy far less capable of fighting this virus than in any other advanced nation. This is the America that stumbled into the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic catastrophe it unleashed. An America with an economy $2 trillion smaller and a workforce $2.5 trillion a year poorer than they otherwise would have been had inequality held constant since 1975. This is an America in which 47% of renters are cost-burdened, in which 40% of households can't cover a $400 emergency expense, in which half of Americans over age 55 have no retirement savings at all. This is an America in which 28 million have no health insurance, and in which 44 million underinsured Americans can't afford the deductibles or copays to use the insurance they have. This is an America that recklessly rushed to reopen its economy in the midst of a deadly pandemic because businesses were too fragile to survive an extended closure and workers too powerless and impoverished to defy the call back to work. There are some who blame the current plight of working Americans on structural changes in the underlying economy, on automation, and especially on globalization. According to this popular narrative, the lower wages of the past 40 years were the unfortunate but necessary price of keeping American businesses competitive in an increasingly cutthroat global market. But in fact, the $50 trillion transfer of wealth the Rand Report documents has occurred entirely within the American economy, not between it and its trading partners. No, this upward redistribution of income, wealth, and power wasn't inevitable. It was a choice, a direct result of the trickle-down policies we chose to implement since 1975. We chose to cut taxes on billionaires and to deregulate the financial industry. We chose to allow CEOs to manipulate share prices through stock buybacks and to lavishly reward themselves with the proceeds. We chose to permit giant corporations through mergers and acquisitions to accumulate the vast monopoly power necessary to dictate both prices charged and wages paid. We chose to erode the minimum wage and the overtime threshold and the bargaining power of labor. For 4 decades, we chose to elect political leaders who put the material interests of the rich and powerful above those of the American people. Other nations are suffering less from COVID-19 because they made better choices. And the good news is that America can too. Economics is a choice. We could choose to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 or $20 an hour and peg it to productivity growth like in the decades before 1975. We could choose to revalue work so that the majority of Americans once again earn time and a half pay for every hour worked over 40 hours a week. We could choose to provide affordable, high-quality health care, child care, and education to all Americans, while modernizing our social insurance and retirement systems so that contract and gig workers aren't left out and left behind. We could choose to make it easier for workers to organize and to defend the rights and interests of those who can't. We could choose to build a more equitable, resilient, and prosperous America, an America that grows its economy by intentionally including every American in it. But given our nation's radical redistribution of wealth and power these past 40 years, it won't be easy. What American workers need are multiple, simultaneous experiments in rebuilding worker power, from tweaking existing labor laws to sectoral bargaining to the creation of whole new trade associations and broad-based not-for-profit organizations. Imagine an AARP for all working Americans, relentlessly dedicated to both raising wages and reducing the cost of thriving, a mass membership organization so large and so powerful that our political leaders won't dare to look the other way. Only then, by matching power with power, can we clear a path to enacting the laws and policies necessary to ensure that trickle-down economics never threatens our health, safety, and welfare again. There is little evidence that the current administration has any interest in dealing with this crisis. Our hope is that a Biden administration would be historically bold, but make no mistake that both our political and economic systems will collapse absent solutions that scale to the enormous size of the problem. The central goal of our nation's economic policy must be nothing less than the doubling of median income. We must dramatically narrow inequalities between distributions while eliminating racial and gender inequalities within them. This is the standard to which we should hold leaders from both parties. To advocate for anything less would be cowardly or dishonest or both. Notice they're not calling for what I call for, which is a surrounding of the halls of power, which is what this is actually going to take, right? Like, this is close. An AARP for all working Americans, right? Like a working class union, right? But I mean, we need to push for much more than this, right? It is simply not enough to create a large, broad-based union to fight against the psychopath class perpetually. We need the elimination, the wholesale, full-scale, complete elimination of the psychopath class. Literally transfer the wealth and the means of production away from the psychopath class, also known as the capitalist class, into the hands of the working class and tell these people to go get jobs. Fuck off. Forever. And I am of the opinion that many of them should be tried and incarcerated for crimes against humanity. Like, certainly the people who have been in charge of the fossil fuel industry, whose own people told them, oh, hey, this will destroy the species, and they lied about it for decades. Certainly those people should go to prison forever at bare minimum, right? Like barest minimum. And I am of the opinion that until those people are at least in prison permanently, we're not even close to even attempting, right? Yeah, they are scared. They are scared. They know what's happening. Like, they know what's happening. People like me are showing up. People like me are showing up and saying what I say. And they have no mechanism to actually prevent me from stopping, right? They can shoot me. They can deplatform me. They can do all of that stuff. But the message is out there. And they see it. They know it's coming. They know it's happening, right? And they know they can't prevent it because they know how bad they've fucked up. Like, their strategy legitimately, because they're psychopaths, right? Their strategy is to legitimately take the wealth they've stolen from the populace and go to, like, pedophile sex islands and set up shop on the pedophile sex islands, right? That's their goal. And are we just going to watch them do it? Are we just going to stand by and allow it to happen? Like, and honestly, I think the authors of this piece are deadly concerned about the rising fascist threat that exists in America. Like, the reason why there is a rising fascist threat is because the system has abandoned millions of people. It's abandoned millions of people. And so, what's happening? Well, grifters and con men are coming into the conversation. And they are pointing. And why was this article so insistent that we have to take the blame off of blaming women and minorities for the trouble? Because that's the narrative being used by the fascists in order to galvanize power and seize it. What do you think is going to happen when the Republicans come back into power? Like, how do you think this is going to go? Right? And when the Republicans come back into power and begin to decimate the populace, right, the way that fascists do, the Democrats are just going to stand by with their hands crossed. And they're just going to be like, no, well, what are you going to do about it? Right? Nothing will fundamentally change. Like, we are at a point now where the powerful have abandoned us. The powerful have completely abandoned us. They do not care about us. They are not responding to us. What I expect to see is a ramping up of the wealth extraction. Because now they know their hands are caught. They see, like, their grifts no longer work. They understand that people get that they are thieves and liars and psychopaths. And so now they're just going to ramp up the looting as fast as possible, and then make their escape. That is what they are planning on doing, and they're doing it in front of our eyes. We're witnessing it happening in real time. And now you're starting to see articles like this get published in well-established capitalist magazines like Time. Like, these guys know that there is going to be a revolution. Like, it is going to happen. They are aware of it. And they are doing everything they can to push back and fight back, or at least stall, so that they can extract the most amount of wealth they can and then escape to their pedophile sex islands. See what you guys are saying. Yeah, we got our $15, but in US dollars it's only 11 really. Yeah, and what with inflation going on, like none of that is going to matter anymore, right? Like it literally isn't going to matter. The inflation is going to spike so much, right? Because the goal now of the psychopath class is to extract as much wealth as possible. They don't care at all about balancing anything. They don't care at all about balancing anything or keeping any. So they're just going to extract as much wealth as they can out of the economy, which is going to make inflation skyrocket, right? And it won't matter. You could be paid $100 an hour, right? This happened in Germany, right? That people literally were taking wheelbarrows of money to buy a loaf of bread. People were going to work and demanding payment in cash at the beginning of the day because they knew by the end of the day their money would be worth less. That's how fast the inflation was going. And that's what's going to happen here as a guarantee. That's for certain. It is surely going to happen. This is why these liberals don't give a fuck about oh yeah, sure, we'll give you a support system, because all of that is going to be meaningless soon. Very soon. It's going to be very meaningless very soon as these psychopaths attempt to completely dismantle and completely destroy the civil society. Because they know. Incidentally, some of you, I know you've been asking, so here you go. This is a powerful article. Oops, what have I done? What did I just do? Refresh. Control C. And the death cult is afraid. Like, they know, right? They know that people could just start surrounding their houses like we should, right? They know. Like, the only thing that's saving them right now is hesitancy and cowardice. That's it, right? It's that, like, it's COVID hesitancy, right? And the general cowardiceness of the populace. That's it. And, like, do we genuinely believe that these liberals are gonna, like, fight back against people if they actually start surrounding the halls of power? Yeah, and clueless liberals ask why so many are quitting their jobs. Well, and also what an article like this does, right, is that it completely shows that the individualists are frauds. that they're just clueless, illiterate frauds. Like, what the individualists are literally saying is that we don't need to actually create any kind of, like, lifeguarding system in the midst of a tsunami because it's up to each individual to swim harder. We don't need to do anything about, like, natural events that occur and are overwhelmingly sweeping because it's up to the individual to take care of themselves. Right? Like this incoherent, more and more psychotic sounding nonsense that is coming out of the right wing as the system they actively plunder collapses around them. Hey Dave, haven't seen you in a long time. Greetings from Brazil. It's less wild over here considering a fascist in charge. Oh, and he's gone. All right. Oh yeah, it's gonna get worse. Of course it's gonna get worse. I wonder, hey Eric, how you doing, pod? Good to see you. I wonder who predicted all of this. Nah, Karl Marx was wrong according to the fascist economy. Eugen von blah, 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 yeah. Nothing will fundamentally change. America does need a rewriting of the Constitution, absolutely. Like, its Constitution needs to be rewritten from the ground up. Like, you can hang on to, like, some of the, like freedom of speech, right, gun rights, all that kind of stuff. I think that the Second Amendment probably should be rewritten. Right? But, like, the fundamental basis of it makes a certain degree of sense. But, like, the structure of the power, like, the power structure is designed to ensure that it's wealthy psychopaths who are in charge all the time. Like, that's the point. Right? Like, the Constitution was written by slave owners who didn't want to pay taxes to a king. That's literally how this document got written. Right? Maybe we should talk about that. Maybe we should be like, maybe being ruled by a document written by literal slave owners is probably a bad idea. And they're scared. Yeah. This article goes beyond the limits of simple Keynesianism. Are we re-entering the days of yore? Mid-1800s when Karl Marx was published in the New York Times? I mean, it is getting to the point. Like, this guy is a venture capitalist, right? It is getting to the point now where the system is so unrepentantly disastrous that those who are not psychopathic, who simply operate within the capitalist structure, are beginning to actually, like, acknowledge reality as real, right? There are capitalists within the capitalist system who are looking up and going like, hey, there's a fucking comet. Like, that's how desperately obvious all of this has become. Like, it is no longer a fringe position. It is no longer a on the side sort of a thing, right? This is right now, it's in front of our faces. It is clear, it is obvious. And even these guys are saying, like, we need a mass movement. Like, we need a mass organization of labor to fight back against this psychopath class that is abandoning us. And, of course, they don't go as far as I do, which is take that mass movement and surround the halls of power with it. But that's what must happen. That's what must occur. And in my view, like, I'll say it over and over again until the day I die. The mistake that the communists and the socialists made under FDR was that they allowed the capitalists to keep the means of production. That the capitalists sacrificed everything. They allowed the tax rate to go to 90% on them. They allowed the working class access to employment insurance, to better rates of education, to an old age pension, right? To all of these things that the working class had never had before, right? They sacrificed everything so that they could keep the means of production. And what have they done with it? They've dismantled the New Deal, and now they're threatening an extinction event that is so obvious and apparent that it must be said that they're doing it intentionally. Just simply by their inaction. We have to remove the means of production Because if we surround the halls of power and get them to capitulate a bunch of things, but allow them to continue existing, then in 100 years they'll threaten yet another extinction event, because that's obviously what they want. It's obviously what they want. These people are evil. These people are psychopaths. These people must be stopped. Go away. And both the Republicans, the Democrats, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the NDP, the Greens, they're all capitulate. Like they're all corrupted. They're all corrupted. We're not going to be able to go to a ballot box and be like, Liberal, please. Oh, NDP this time. Like, that's not going to work. Simply put, because the system itself has been completely corrupted. It's literally a demon holding out a box and saying, which one are you gonna vote for? Like, and we're supposed to be suckered into this shit. Like, it's total trash. It's total trash. The entire system must go. It cannot be reformed. It cannot be negotiated with. These people are psychopaths who have lost the basic ability to respond even to rational thinking. They can't think rationally. They're incapable of it, even if they wanted to. Like, do you understand? This is an important point that you have to understand. Even if they wanted to, even if they decided, okay, I'm going to think rationally and make decisions based in empathy, they would still fail because they are incapable of it. That's what's crucial to understand. We cannot negotiate with these people. They are incapable of empathy and reason. They lie because it is fun for them to do, and it comes naturally. When they encounter a situation, the first thing that comes into their head is, how can I lie about it? And how can I pilfer as much wealth as I possibly can? And they can't stop thinking that way. It's impossible. So even as you negotiate with these psychopaths, you'll think you're getting ahead, only to realize after the papers are signed that over here they've done something to completely fuck over the deal they just made, because that's who they are. Right? It's like the story of the scorpion and the frog. Right? That the scorpion says, oh, I'm going to swim across the river. Frog, would you like to sit on my back? And we'll go across the river together. And the frog goes, no, of course not. You're going to sting me. You're a scorpion. And the scorpion says, no, I shall not do that. No, of course not. And eventually convinces the frog to get on his back. And what does the scorpion do? He stings the frog. And when he stings the frog says, you said you would not. And the scorpion says, I'm a scorpion. Well, in exactly the same way, these people are psychopaths. And they will say anything to you. And they will capitulate anything to you in order to convince you to keep doing all the work while they do nothing. That's the game. And if you start to trick yourself into believing that you're making any headway or getting anywhere, well then don't come crying to me when the scorpion stings you, because it's a fucking scorpion. Ghislaine Maxwell will be set free soon, just wait. Well, I mean, and it's not like she's going to, like, maximum security penitentiary. Like, she's gonna, like, live in, like, a penthouse or, like, on, like, a farm somewhere, right? They'll put, like, a little bracelet on her ankle so that she can't, like, go anywhere. But, like, the life that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to live while in prison is going to be better than 90% of Americans. Like, The only limiting factor that she will have is that she won't be able to like go outside. She'll be able to phone whoever she wants. She'll be able to organize with whoever she wants. She'll be able to talk to whoever she wants. She'll be able to get any kind of book she wants, any kind of thing that she wants. She's not going to be limited at all, except she's not going to be able to like go to places. Like that's the only limitation that they're going to put on her. And her life is going to be like, it'll be like she's living like a Victorian like dream, like Jane Austen or something, right? Like her life is going to be like, most people would look at the life that Ghislaine Maxwell is going to live while incarcerated and they would be like, damn, that's nice. Oh, so I just don't go to the movies? Okay. I can do that for the like probably 4 years, right? She'll be in prison for 4 years, maybe less, right? And they'll release her. How do we know that's true? Because that's what they did to Jeffrey Epstein the first time, right? Jeffrey Epstein was incarcerated for pedophilia as well as sex trafficking of minors. Right? And he spent 2 years in prison. Right? Literally an offense that like somebody should be put, like if you do that, you should be put in a hole and we should pave the hole over, right? And forget that you're there. As far as I'm concerned. He spent 2 years in a minimum security prison. Again, like a prison that's like kind of nice, honestly. And like 2 years? Yeah, but Jeffrey Epstein definitely killed himself, right? Definitely. Have you seen the video from Tom Hartman talking about how fascism always comes around 80 years in the U.S.? No, I haven't. Ever since the beginning of U.S. history. I mean, like, again, I keep saying over and over again, right? Fascism and capitalism are linked. They're not different. Like, it's not a different thing. It really is like the difference. Like if you have a person who, when put under periods of stress, like when things are nice, everyone's gonna just be like, yeah, great, la la la. But when stress comes and when things get difficult, they pull out a knife and they start janking people, right? Like, does that mean that person is different? No, it's not a different person. It's the same person. It's just the circumstances have changed. And so, like, of course capitalism is willing to put on the happy smile and be like, yeah, everything's fine when things are fine and when it's not threatened and when everything's going like gangbusters. But when you threaten it, what's it going to do? It's going to treat you how it treats people overseas, right? Like the capitalists were murdering people for decades overseas, right? We didn't call it fascism then. Why? Because they're not white or they're not us. Right? Like when they bombed Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, right? Like when they were destroying in South America for fucking decades and decades, it was all capitalism, right? Oh, but now it's happening here, so it's fascism. It's completely different. It's somehow a different thing. It's the same shit. It's the same fucking system. It's just happening to us now. Yeah, we need to ramp up blockades and strikes. Yeah, Republicans maximize their power. Democrats do nothing with it, but attempt to share power with fascists under the guise of bipartisanship and austerity. Yeah, like they're allies, right? They're allies. That's the thing that like especially the people who pretend like the Republicans are worse somehow than the Democrats, right? They're allies. They work together, right? The phrase of like they're two wings of the same bird. It's like yeah, like they work together. Hey, Robin, how you doing? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. The artificial corporate inflation as they gained record profits in a pandemic. Yep, exactly. Get ready for another 30% carbon tax increase on April 1st while MPs give themselves a 10% salary increase. I call this double dip. April Fools. Happens every year. Yeah. People are probably quitting due to their casual cynicism. Honestly, Harry, I really do think that most people are starting to look around and be like, we are in the midst of an extinction event. We are in the midst of an apocalypse, all right? And that is not hyperbolic to say. We are reaching an apocalypse event. That something is going to occur that is going to restructure human civilization itself. Some of us are getting ready for it, and some of us are not. And when you're in that kind of a mode as a people, right, your mortality is right in front of you all the time. That's why this pandemic, that's truly the reason why this pandemic is so stressful for most of us. Like, most people throughout this period of time are fine. Most people are not going to die. Most people are not going to get the thing, right? But it's the overwhelming sense of our mortality where we can't ignore it. The existential threat is right there all the time. Every time you put the mask on, you're essentially putting the mask on and the Grim Reaper is right fucking there. Right fucking there, watching you do it. And a lot of these people are looking at their mortality, realizing that we have such a short period of time here on this earth, and then looking at like Wendy's or fucking McDonald's and just being like, nah, brah. Like, nah, not worth it. Like, not worth my time. Especially as they pay a wage that doesn't even pay the fucking rent anymore. Like, people are starting to realize that the engagement in this superficial economy that's capitalism is worthless. It does nothing. It provides nothing of value. It doesn't fuel you. It doesn't feed you. It doesn't give you anything. It just wastes your time. That's all it's for. It's mainly a distraction. And people are desperately hungry for more than that. People are attempting to find their meaning in the world in serious ways. And they don't know how to do that, and the structure doesn't permit them to do it, or isn't interested in helping them do it. And so what are they doing? They're quitting everything. They're no longer participating, which in my view is right. And in my view, it's the opposite of cynicism. Seeking your own personal meaning, attempting to discover something larger than yourself, attempting to connect into something that fuels your soul and fuels your spirit, is the opposite of cynicism. Acknowledging that psychopaths are destroying the species with this system that's a complete and total failure, that's not cynicism. Like, that's reality. And no longer participating in it seems completely rational, completely normal. I'm ready to buy bolt cutters and start opening buildings to let houseless people sleep somewhere warm. I was up all night crying, thinking about the people living in the park by me. Yeah, fucking do it. I don't give a shit. Like, that. I don't really understand why we still think we need to follow these rules anymore. Like, I shouldn't say this. This is what gets me banned off of YouTube, by the way, saying this. But, like, so I won't dwell on it for too long. But, like, what rules? What are you talking about? What do you think about the second Bill of Rights that FDR wanted to pass? Yeah, no, absolutely. It's telling that he didn't, right? Like, it is telling that he didn't. And you can pretend as though that happened because, like, oh, he finally died and, like, all of that kind of stuff. But, like, when FDR was asked what his greatest achievement was, he said he saved capitalism, right? So he was always doing the absolute bare minimum. Always. He was always doing the absolute bare minimum, which tells you how powerful the communists and the socialists were at the time, which is why they had to be destroyed through the McCarthyian movement, right? And this is why I ultimately put it on the communists and the socialists, that they let the structure, they let capitalism off the hook. That they lost the energy, right? They capitulated. They got up to the finish line, and then they went, good enough, and walked away. And that's their mistake. And it is a mistake. And it's one that we will not make again. They will capitulate everything. They will double your wages. They will create a basic income. They will do all of this, and we still have to fight. Because we have to kill the demon. We have to go up the mountain. We've got to walk up Mount Doom, past Sauron's eye. We got to take that fucking ring, and we got to throw it into Mount Doom. And they will do everything they can to make sure that we don't. Because their goal is to destroy this place. And if we destroy them, they can't do it. And the people ultimately responsible for what's going on today are the communists and socialists who didn't kill this demon when they had the chance. They let it off the hook. And the reality is that FDR's second Bill of Rights, because the means of production would have been kept in the ownership class, they would have dismantled it instantly. The second they could have. They would have come up with some bullshit claim. It's not working, it's causing economic problem, oh my god, it's such a, we're falling behind efficiencies, all this kind of shit, and they would have got rid of it. It would have been the first thing they would have done. We have to remove the means of production from the capitalist class. And until we've done that, we are not finished. Fun fact, the New York Times said in 1859 that abolitionists somehow harmed the cause of ending slavery, and that they needed to let the southern states end it on their own terms when they felt like it. That's fun, Mocked. Isn't that fun? Right? Yeah, people, they'll just end slavery, right? Yeah, they'll just end slavery, right? Nice and normal, That's usually how it goes. Like, people say that kind of stuff and they point to places like Canada. Like, we ended slavery legislatively, right? But it was because we looked down at the states and went like, yeah, maybe not with the war. Like, yeah, maybe not, right? Like, maybe not. Like, the political class will only respond to existential threats. Like, they don't give a shit how you vote. Truly, they don't. Right? Like, maybe here in Ontario, you had Kathleen Wynne, right? She personally probably cared that she is no longer the leader, right? On a personal level. But she goes off and works for corporate power. Like, she doesn't give a fuck, right? So it's just a vanity project for her, right? And that's all it is. It's just a series of vanity projects. I'm the governor of Massachusetts. Like, it's just a series of vanity projects. Like, the cult itself, as an organization, does not give a fuck if it's conservative or liberal or Republican or Democrat, right? They don't care. The only thing that the cult itself cares about is an existential threat that acknowledges the existence of the death cult and speaks on terms of eliminating the death cult. That's the only thing it cares about. That's why FDR had to respond to the socialists and the communists, because they were standing outside his window calling for a full-scale revolution, which they should have done. Peel Paramedics Union is trolling Doug Ford. So, at Ford Nation wants to run around in his pickup truck to help with shortages of pandemic resources. Deal, but only if he lets us run the government long enough to fix the mess he has made. Yeah, Doug Ford's a total loser. Like, he's a complete loser. Like, literally just like born the son of a former politician, millionaire, a millionaire inheritor, drug dealer who beats his wife. Like, he's an enormous loser. What you just stated, John, should be written and published in a 10-page manifesto. Your manifesto will put the National Post and Globe and Mail to shame. I mean, I don't know, dude. It's just true. Like, it's just the fucking truth. Like, it's. I'm so fucking sick and tired of like the dishonest. It's not even the dishonesty, right? It's just the bullshit. It's like the total delusional bullshit that people are willing to tolerate. Like, I'm fine if you want to have like a disagreement on like how to enact policy or any of this, but we're literally talking about, oh hey, should citizens have food and shelter? Like, that's not a political position. Like, if you say no to that, or if you think they need to fucking earn it, then there's something wrong with your goddamn brain. Like, there's something wrong with you on a fundamental level. Yeah. She'll live in a luxury healing lodge funded by sociopath billionaires. Yeah, of course. That's exactly how it's going to go for her. The occupying American government gave Japan and Germany all the rights in FDR's Second Bill of Rights during Reconstitution after World War II. Yep, the American people did not receive these rights. Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. And of course we see the benefit of that bills on those country, yeah. FDR said the Second Bill of Rights applied regardless of race, but then again, he was a volatile racist, so who knows? Yep. No, most of what FDR said, and most of what he did because he had to, right? He like the threat of revolution was real, right? Like it's not like how it is today, where like most of the population is just gullible cowards, right? There were literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people outside his window every day holding signs that said revolution now with the fucking communist symbol on it, right? And the threat was real. Like those people could have just walked in the door, right? And like there were clashes with police and military forces all the time, constantly. So the threat was very, very real for FDR. And so anytime he stands up and says something, yeah, of course he's going to basically take the rhetoric that's being said by the communists and the socialists and say it back to them. He doesn't want them, he wants them to think that he's on their side. But he's not. Like he isn't. At all. He's just doing what he needs to do to prevent a revolution that should have happened. Yeah, the USA has always had a one-party government. Of course, with American extravagance, they need two parties. Exactly. Different topic, but it demonstrates that capitalism rewards capitalists and discriminates against the working class. Just before I joined the podcast, I finished listening to a video where a young man was arrested for basically hitting his father, who abused him all his life and had enough. Yeah. As a reward, the U.S. system sentenced him to 10 years because of his mental health problem. Yeah. Like, but this is only, it isn't actually a deviation, right? Like, the American prison system is a slave system. That's what it is, right? It's not interested in rehabilitation. It's not even really that interested in punishment, right? It's primarily interested and almost exclusively interested in finding ways to get people incarcerated so that they can get free labor from them, right? It's a slave system. That's the point of it. And so, oh, that guy hit that guy. 10 years, right? Well, what's the context doesn't matter. Like the context doesn't matter. They don't care, right? You hear stories about like a guy stole some hedge clippers, right? And then you go talk to the guy and he's like, I didn't steal it. I just like saw that there were hedge clippers there. I had to trim my own hedges. So I picked them up and used them for a bit and I intended to return them, but then suddenly there are cops at my door, right? Like, and it's like the kind of shit that you'd be like, oh yeah, like that's just what, like a neighborly thing to do would be to see that like that guy's using your hedge clippers and like maybe go over and be like, hey dude, can you at least ask? Like, it's fine if you want to borrow them and use them. But because the guy's black, right? You just call the cops, have him arrested. The guy spent 10 years in prison for that, right? That's the way the system works. And it works well for the Americans, right? They enslave their black population, right? Your white supremacists and your Latino population gets picked off too. But you basically get to just continue the project of black slavery, right? Like, where's the civil rights movement? It's in the prison. That's what's going on, right? And they're incentivized entirely to do this. When judges incarcerate people, they get paid by the prison system. There are people who've got pinged for this. So like, no, the American system is absolutely a slave system. Just something for you guys to know. If you find sometimes my grammar to be decent, other time horrible, because I have a mental disability, it causes me not to see those problems. Don't worry about that, Eric. Thanks for sharing, though, bud. Thanks for sharing. That's those sorts. It can be scary to share those sorts of things with people, right? And you never know how people are going to react. So thank you for feeling confident enough to share that with us. And I know for myself, I wasn't really thinking about it. Believe me, my grammar and my sentences and my spelling are atrocious in the first place. So, but thank you for sharing, Eric. That's very kind of you to think of us. And we think well of you too. Ugh. What a fucking time to be alive, eh? What a fucking time. This article really set me off. This fucking article really set me off, man. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, it's good to see that even the capitalists are starting to do it, but, like, nothing's going to happen, right? Like, the political class is not capable of responding. And so it is literally going to be, like, the working class coming together and going into a full-scale strike. Like, that's the only thing that's gonna matter anymore. I'm actually going to bookmark this for myself. This is a really powerful article. I'm really happy I read this. So, speaking where did I see this? So, speaking of the fear, right? Reddit's problem is a global one, say the current and former moderators. Indian subreddits like r/Choti and Desimeta include Islamophobic posts and calls for the genocide of Muslims. In subreddits about China like r/Sino and Gen Zedong, users attack Uyghurs and promote violence against them. So I'm actually part of both of those subreddits, and this is a completely false statement. This is an attempt, and we're seeing these attempts happen more and more and more. This is an attempt to lump communists and socialists in with fascists. That's the goal, right? And so, and this is, again, I just read a Time magazine article. So here's Time magazine claiming that subreddits like r/Sino and r/Gen Zedong are attacking Uyghurs and promoting violence against them, when the opposite is the case. Absolutely. And this is being done because they're scared, because they know where the revolutionary fervor is happening. They're aware of it, right? It's not being obfuscated, and it's this fear that's going to lead to all kinds of absurdist nonsense. Google bonus army conflict. The Bonus Army was a group of 43,000 demonstrators made up of 17,000 veterans of the United States of World War I, together with their families and affiliated groups, who gathered in Washington, D.C. in the mid-1932 to demand early cash redemption of their service bonus certificates. Organizers called the demonstrators the Bonus Expeditionary Force. Many veterans had been out of work. The World War Adjusted Compensation Act awarded them bonuses. And you're looking for the On July 28th, under prodding from the Herbert Hoover, the D.C. commissioners ordered Pelham D. Glassford to clear their buildings, rather than let the protesters drift away as he had previously recommended. When the veterans rioted, an officer drew his revolver and shot at the veterans, two of them who died later. Reports on communist elements. An Army intelligence report claimed the BEF intended to occupy the capital permanently and instigate fighting as a signal for communist uprisings in all major cities. Yeah, get to it. Well, they're simply going to ignore those things and they're not going to let people like Thomas Sowell. Yeah. And they're going to get people like Thomas Sowell who will simply ignore those data and make all kinds of bullshit, how inequality is a myth. Yeah, like if you don't pay attention to facts, like if you don't care about facts or reason or empathy or compassion, then you can make whatever claim you like, right? Which is, like, it's literally how these guys clutch onto a Bible that tells them to act exactly the oppositely, right? Like, this is why I keep saying, like, these guys are not capable of responding to reason, right? Like, that's what's important to remember. It's not that they don't want to. It's not that they're disinterested. It's that they are incapable. Like, literally, they cannot do it. It's like you're asking a piece of coal to count to 20. Like, it just can't do it. The sociopaths have a limited time on here, so they are doing everything to suppress the truth. I mean, I'm more or less of the opinion that what we are actually caught in is a kind of nihilistic narcissism, where figures like Bezos, right, and like Bezos and Musk and all these guys, like, they're getting older. They know that they're going to die, and instead of humbling themselves at the altar of the universe, right, which demands of all of us that we die, they are going to strike out in vengeance against it. And they are literally going to say, well, if this place is going to kill me, the most important thing in the world, because I'm a narcissist, then I might as well destroy everything around me, right? I might as well attempt to kill it back, right? Like, and I think that is actually what is happening. That narcissists like Bezos and Musk and Gates are hell-bent to destroy the species and the planet because they are because they refuse to go out with humility or quietly, right? Or you could be like Candace Owens, who simply lie, just make BS. Yeah, she admitted to last week. Did she outright say it? Let's see what she said. I mean, Candace Owens is obviously a fraud, right? Like, she's obviously just says whatever. Admits to lying. If you can have me search something or anything like this, right? Like, I'll gladly show that. But, like, I mean, but it doesn't seem to matter anymore, right? Like, take a look at someone like Tim Pool, for example. Like, Tim Pool has admitted that he's a fraud and a liar. Like, he's admitted it straight out, right in front of your face. He said to you that, like, I don't care. Like, he will just say what his base wants him to say, and he's very open about that, right? And he's open about how he will obfuscate what his actual position on issues is. He's very open about that, and yet people still listen to him. So, like, we're legitimately in a period of time now where huge sections of the populace simply do not care about the truth. Like, they don't care about reality at all, and they're turning to these overt, obvious grifters and these overt, obvious frauds who admit to being frauds, like, straight up say it to their face, and they don't care. They don't care because all they care about is having their bias confirmed, right? Oh, here we go.
Never going to get it. I don't care if I'm on my...
Let's see.
If I'm on my deathbed and they say it can save you, I'm not going to get it. I'm principally now opposed to it.
Conservative propagandist Candace Owens accidentally admitted to her entire anti-vax grift during a taping of one of her shows. Check this out, and then I'll explain.
Next question. Are you really unvaccinated? Really? And then there is a shared tweet that says Candace Owens is lying to her followers about being vaccinated. And it shows me at the UFC. And it's, I guess, planning for your event. Oh, the Madison Square Garden website, which says that you've had at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine prior to attending. I would say to the people, first and foremost, I am obviously unvaccinated. You follow the story of me trying to get a COVID test in Aspen, and I only had to get a COVID test to show that it was negative because I was unvaccinated, so I didn't go through those jumps and hoops pretending to be vaccinated. I am not getting this vaccine, ever. Never going to get it. I don't care if I'm on my deathbed and they say it can save you, I'm not going to get it. I'm principally now opposed to it, and I do not understand why anybody who is healthy, able-bodied, and young would ever get this vaccine if you're not at risk of COVID. Again, personal choice. You can choose something differently. Regarding the UFC event, I would instruct you not to visit the Madison Square Garden website, but to visit the New York City law website. You better understand that every time the elites make laws for you, there is a way that they can get around the laws that they're making for you. And there are carve-outs in New York City of when you do not need to present a vaccine card. Unfortunately, I fall under one of those carve-outs.
Incredible. So I have several points to make here. Let me first start by saying it doesn't matter whether or not she is personally vaccinated. That doesn't matter. What matters is how society interacts with her. She has a massive platform. She is a big celebrity in the conservative world, at least. What she says about the vaccines and that impact of what she says on her audience, on society, that's what matters. What she does personally, I don't care if she's personally vaccinated or not. It doesn't matter. I still think she is. I'll get to why in a minute. But it doesn't matter. So what matters is the lies that she spreads. And this goes to her big accidental admission here. She says, quote, "I don't care if I'm on my deathbed and they say it's going to save you. I'm not going to get it." She's admitting there that this is not about life or death. This is not about the science. This is not about the efficacy of the vaccine. This is simply a culture war issue for her. That on principle, she's against the vaccine. But what principle? If it's going to save your life and you're still not going to get it.
That's pretty weak. I'm just gonna stop it here and just be like, pretty weak team, honestly. Like, Candace Owens is obviously a fraud. Like, she's obviously a fraud. You don't need to work too hard to see that she's a fraud, but like, that's like a gotcha, kind of like caught you in like a turn of phrase sort of thing. That's not like a tacit admission. Like, Tim Pool has like outright admitted that he is that he spreads disinformation about his own positions, right? Like, he's outright admitted that. Like that's almost a verbatim quote that I just said about Tim Pool. Someone like Vosh, has admitted that he's a CIA snitch. Right? Like, outright. And like those are the things that I'm far more interested in. I'm actually not that interested in like platforming someone like Candace Owens and then like doing a gotcha, because like I gotta be straight. Like, if you actually think that Candace Owens is interesting or credible or has something to offer to the conversation, then I'm not the guy that's gonna change your mind. Honestly, like, Candace Owens herself shows you that she's a fraud. Like, just by listening to her. You can listen to her for maybe like, I'd give it like 5 minutes, right? But like, she goes on Joe Rogan's podcast and Joe Rogan just like dunks on her, right? Like, she's like very clearly taking money from corporate power sources and saying whatever they want her to say. Like, that's extremely obvious about who she is and what she has no like, she's not actually a person. You understand? Like, she's just an empty vessel that corporate power just flows through. Eric's saying keep watching, so let's keep watching.
Then what's the principle? The principle is that this is a culture war issue for her. She has turned this into a culture war issue, has nothing at all to do with the data, with the science, with the efficacy of the vaccine. Otherwise, she would get it if it was going to save her life. Now, of course, that isn't how vaccines work anyways. I mean, if she had COVID on her deathbed, getting the vaccine in the last moments of her life is not going to save her life. But even in the...
I love it. David Dole's basically just like, that's not how vaccines work anyway. Idiot! What a dumb idiot! Yeah, Candace Owens is like, she's paid to be stupid, right? She's intentionally dumb. That's who she is.
The situation that she describes there, she is accidentally admitting that this is not about how effective the vaccine is. This is simply a culture war issue for her, which is why you can't trust anything that comes out of this lady's mouth. Which gets to this next part. So, Madison Square Garden. So she raised the topic there. This has come up since she claimed she was not vaccinated, yet somehow was at an event at Madison Square Garden that requires you to be vaccinated to get in there. She says, don't go to the MSG website. Go to the New York Law website. Okay, let's go to the New York Law website, where it says here, people ages 5 to 12 are required to show proof they have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and people 12 and older must show proof of 2 doses, except for Johnson & Johnson recipients, which is just 1 dose. And you go down here and it says for indoor entertainment and certain meeting spaces, including movie theaters, music, and concert venues. There you go. Madison Square Garden. And if you go to the Madison Square Garden website, same thing. You must, as she showed you in that screenshot, you must be vaccinated. So either she is vaccinated, which I think she is, or, as she also says there, the elites can get around it. So I'm not sure if she realized what she was saying in that moment, but she said...
You know what this is reminding me of? This is reminding me of something that that Lenin said. Or actually, I saw this fairly recently of Lenin, which is that, like, I forget the name of the fellow he was talking about. I'll call him, like, Kiotsky, just for a second. I don't think that's obviously not right. But, like, Lenin was responding, like, this fellow Kiotsky, Lenin wouldn't debate him, right? And this guy Kiotsky was saying, like, oh, he's scared of me, or all this kind of stuff. And Lenin's final statement was like, what, we should respond to these frauds and these liars every single time they want to say anything? They'll waste our time completely, right? It's just enough to... Kotsky, I was close. Thanks, Mocked. See, Mocked, look at you. You're a champion, bud. And he essentially said, if we must respond to everything they put forward, then they will just waste our time. It is easier to say they are frauds and losers and liars and be done with it. And this is exactly how I feel about Owens. This is exactly how I feel about, like, I've said it several times, Poole and Vosh, right? Like, I'm never going to debate these people, right? I'm never going to go on their shit and actually talk to them because they're worthless, right? Say that they're worthless, spit in their direction, and be done with it. And let them throw their pathetic little stones and let them stamp their feet and do all this kind of stuff. Like, don't focus on these losers whose only interest is inflating their own ego and wasting your time. Because that's all they are. Simone Sanders, they're just frauds. And once you realize and see that someone is a fraud, then that's literally the only conversation that you should have about them and to them. You're a fraud. We don't need to discuss anything. Like, there's nothing legitimate about any of this, right? You're not going to convince me you're not a fraud. And the people who take you seriously are dupes. Moving on, right? And, like, for real, if you've got to be convinced that Candace Owen is a fraud, I got a fucking bridge to sell you, man. John, you're setting off a few red flags. Losers, worthless, frauds. This is not the best way to refer you to other human beings. I mean, it is if they're frauds. Like, sorry, dude. Like, there are legitimate bad actors in the conversation. Like, there are legitimate bad actors in the conversation who do not care if they are lying to you, who do not care if they are causing mass harm, who do not care if they are hurting other people, right? They don't care. And I'm of the belief that these people actually get off on it. They actually like hurting other people. They enjoy causing suffering. They enjoy getting in the way and causing problems. And yeah, so these people who are doing this are losers who are worthless because they're frauds. And they are frauds. Like, actively working to cause harm in your society on purpose for your own pleasure and enjoyment. No, we get to call those people losers who are worthless and are frauds. And we should be happy to do that. Because they are intentionally trying to hurt us. For money. Like, for God's sakes, I call people psychopaths. Because they are. And it's really easy. If these people want to no longer be called frauds who are losers and are worthless, then they should stop being worthless losers who are frauds. Straight up. Like, I'm not going to pussyfoot around this. I'm not going to glad hand these people, as you call them. Like, they wear human skin. But they sell their humanity for money. Ontario considering forcing hospitals to rehire unvaccinated staff due to surging case numbers. I always thought this was weird. First of all, it's extremely interesting that there are a lot of nurses and doctors who don't want to be vaccinated. That's interesting already on its face, right? What's the thing that I have always said on this channel, right? Listen to the doctors, listen to the nurses, right? That's what I've always said. Well, now you've got like a pretty healthy amount of doctors and nurses who are willing to be fired, who are willing to be let go, right? Who are willing to be sent out of their profession because they don't want to be vaccinated. That's interesting. And I'm yet to see anybody actually like platform those people. I'm yet to see anybody actually talk to those people. Oh, excuse me. And like, aren't we in a crisis? Don't we need as many hands on decks as we can get? And like, and what's the problem, right? Like, now we're starting to see credible evidence that first of all, we always knew that the vaccine wasn't doing anything in regards to transmission, right? Like, we always knew that, in terms of Omicron, at least. But now we're starting to see credible evidence to show that hospitalizations are mattering less. That there are hospitals in Calgary that are reporting that the same amount of, at least equal numbers of people who are equal people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated are being hospitalized, right? Like, that's significant. And so, like, it's odd to me. Like, it's odd to me that it's odd to me that under these circumstances, we're letting nurses and doctors go amidst a crisis, right? And unless the crisis isn't as serious as we're being led on to be. Because we all know there's going to come a point where the pharmaceutical industry is going to try to convince us that the crisis is much worse than it is so that we will buy more shit from them. That they're obviously going to do that. Like, that's speculative. Like, I don't have a smoking gun on that statement, but like, to me, that's fairly obvious that that's going to happen, right? Like, that's like con man grifter 101, right? Like, convince someone they need to buy something from you so that they buy something from you, even if they don't need it. After a year of thinking about this statement, about a year ago, after watching a debate where Richard Wolff was on Fox News and where people said, why is it all the socialists are always so angry and conservatives are always happier? After a year of thinking about this statement, I've come to the conclusion it's because the left is so pissed off at our current affairs and wants to make the changes that is needed for the betterment of people, while the right wing will much better sit back and rather let their fellow men die, all for the sake of liberty. Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly what it is. Or money. I forget about liberty, like money. C.R. Strifey. Sir Strifey. Good to see you, bud. Don't think I've ever seen you around. Maybe it's because they've seen things that everyone else dismisses as anecdotes over and over again. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, leftists reality often has a leftist bias, right? Like, it's become something of a truism. To be like a conservative or to be on the right wing is to delve into a form of delusion at this point. Like, literally, you are just a person who has found themselves with a house and is like, I want to keep house. And that's it. And like, literally everything you say ends up just being incoherent and doesn't make any sense at all. But 90% of Calgary has been vaccinated at least once. If 99 people were vaccinated and one person wasn't, wouldn't there obviously be more vaccinated? Oh, that's an interesting point, actually, Mocked. That's worth saying, too. That is, actually. That's a really good point. Something I hadn't considered. man, this is the thing about this vaccine conversation, right? Like, there's so much, and there's so much data, and there's so many things going on, and that's actually really fair to say, actually, Mocked, like in terms of I'm talking about the nurses, the doctor and the nurses. Oh, okay. Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there, bud. Like, and I just feel like there's, like, why am I not seeing an article from even the Toronto Sun talking to these doctors and nurses? There are doctors and nurses who don't want to be vaccinated. I really genuinely would like to hear what they have to say, but it looks like nobody is going to go talk to them, right? They just are this, like, amorphous group. And so it adds a lot of inconsistency, and it raises red flags for me, is what it does. Like, go talk to these doctors and these nurses. And if anybody has, like, an article where we're talking to these doctors and nurses, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see it. Many doctors and nurses have been infected and understand the science and know it's not necessary for them to be vaccinated as they have natural immunity. Okay. Yeah, that's just it, Mock. There's too much omission. Like, there's too much omission, and it really genuinely looks like there isn't anybody even really attempting to clarify things, right? And, like, something as simple as what you pointed out there, Mocked. I don't want to just glaze over this, Mocked, because I think that's an interesting observation that that is easy to sort of sidestep in the conversation. Like, yeah, of course there's more people who are vaccinated because 90% of people are vaccinated. If only 10% are vaccinated, well, it's like a per capita sort of a thing. So the numbers per capita are still higher amongst the vaccinated, the unvaccinated rather. I hope you're well too, Onward. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. I hope things are treating you well down in Georgia. Natural immunity lasts 3 to 6 months. And this is another thing. Like, Amanda, you're like, there's so many different avenues and aspects and all this kind of stuff. You know a family that's had it 3 times now? Jesus. Tough. Well, a liberal will acknowledge that those things are happening, but try to use reforms in the hope that it will fix capitalism, which is the downfall for people like Tom Hartman. Yeah, that's the liberal problem, right? Liberals are ultimately just incremental reformists. Like, that's what it is, and they don't really get that. And these liberals especially, like this generation of liberals, are like incrementalists. Like, they really are just like, we will increase things by 0.000000001%. Like, and that's considered a reform, right? This group of liberals are really pushing on the idea of being incremental reformists at all. And they're only doing it so that we can't actually say that they're doing absolutely nothing, right? Like, they are standing directly beside absolutely nothing. Like, the absolute garbage that is coming out of these liberals, and this is true in the United States and Canada, right? Like, the only people, like, they have no credibility left. Like, it really is like they're you know when you tell a kid, like, okay, don't come into this room, okay? And then they stand there and they're like, they put like their toe in the room and they're like, oh, but I'm in the room. Oh, I'm in the room. That's these liberals. They're like, oh, but we did something. Oh, but we did something, right? Like, that's the scale. Yes, and was it as severe as the second and third time? I don't want to hijack the convo. That's the last input for a while. Oh, don't worry about that, bud. Don't worry about believe me, if I think you're hijacking the conversation, I'll just ignore you. But, like, the COVID conversation is hard. It is without a doubt the most difficult conversation that I have. And it is because I don't know what to think of it, and I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to pay attention to. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to think about it. and there's so many different perspectives, and there's so much information happening, and then there's like the political desire to scapegoat. Like, this is something I can say, and with certainty, and I will say this with certainty, our political class is scapegoating the unvaccinated in order to deflect responsibility from their own incompetence in regards to the pandemic. That for sure is happening, and I hate that. I hate that a lot, because I don't just throw someone in the bin because they want to be unvaccinated, right? Like, I just don't. Like, in fact, especially as the pandemic grows and moves on, and we're getting into year 3 of it and all this kind of stuff, like, and we're getting farther away from the like of it all, and you can kind of see a little bit more with a bit clarity, like the clarity of hindsight, right? Like, it's completely reasonable for a person who's like, well, I don't trust these corporations, I don't trust this government, I don't trust any of these institutions, I don't trust any of them, they're telling me to put something in my body, get fucked. I'm a bit like, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable, honestly. Like, pretty reasonable. And like, it seems as though there's been a lot of goalpost moving in regards to the conversation of vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And like, initially there's like a fear that's swept into the populace, right? And don't get me wrong, there are people in the unvaccinated conversation that I do think are a bit Looney Tunes. I shouldn't even say a bit Looney Tunes. Like, they're Looney Tunes. Like, they're outright saying that COVID doesn't exist, like that kind of thing. And I'm just like, probably wrong, right? Like, that's probably incorrect. And so, but it's like everything, right? There's like a spectrum, and just because someone is skeptical of these corporations and this vaccine and the whole thing doesn't mean that we should just throw them in throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know? And like, so anyway, so it's when we get talking about COVID, I'm still very malleable. Like, I'm still very, very malleable, because like, that's why I try really hard to focus on the raw data, right? Because that's where the truth actually is. But we're finding more and more that people are manipulating the raw data, right? That like, what's his name? Robert Malone on the Joe Rogan podcast. He really highlighted that hospitals are declaring COVID deaths, even if a person gets shot and they had COVID at the same time. Well, that's a COVID death, right? Because they get extra funding if they do that. And so that causes all kinds of distortions and all kinds of oddities, right? And so it's like, so I just don't know what to say about it, right? I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of distrust in the society. And it really just highlights, ultimately, the failing of the capitalist structure. That the antagonisms that exist in the structure mean that when the society needs to come together and actually work towards communal goals, they can't, because of the antagonisms that are built into the society. And it's and in the COVID conversation, it's become deeply unfortunate. Like I genuinely think that it actually is better for a populace to move forward together, even if what they are doing is not necessarily ideal or not necessarily quote unquote correct. But if they're doing it together, then doing it will probably be more effective, even if it's not the like ideal thing to do. Like, I hesitate to say wrong, because that implies like disaster, right? Like, I'm trying to say, like, if everybody is moving forward on an idea and that idea is not necessarily ideal, but everyone's doing it all together, then it'll probably still be pretty effective, right? Whereas a society that starts to move forward, and even if that society is moving forward in the ideal way, right, which is up for debate, but let's say they are moving forward in the ideal way. Well, if 30% of the society refuses to go along with it, well, then it can't be effective, right? So it's like, in my view, what this COVID conversation is really revealing is this antagonism that exists in our society, and how damaging that antagonism actually is to our social cohesion and our ability to resolve problems. That the narrative of capitalism was always that competition breeds innovation. Well, looks like that's bullshit to me. Looks like that's total fucking bullshit to me. Like, doesn't look like it looks like this competition, this idea of competition and antagonism breeds calcification, that we can't actually solve any problems, because oftentimes to solve the problem, everyone needs to move together, even if there are dissenters, right? Like, you think there's not dissenters in China over the COVID policies? There are dissenters in China, but then they dissent and then they get overruled and then they go along and they do what the populace wants them to do, because they want to live in a cohesive society. And they understand that it's better to move forward towards an unideal goal together than it is to move forward to an ideal goal while fighting each other. And that's the true problem of what's going on in this society, is that we're at each other's throat. And while we're fighting each other, we're saying it's my freedom and my right and my First Amendment, this and all this kind of stuff. Pretending like, oh yeah, this is how society should be structured. We should constantly be arguing and fighting and at each other's throats all of the time. We should constantly be scrabbling around for basic resources. We should constantly be fighting. Like, and we're just going to turn into a backwater. Like, that's what's a shame about it. Like, right now things are like, and people do point out, like, this is the best time in human history. Yeah. Like, I mean, in terms of our technology, I suppose. But in terms of our, like, free time, our ability to actually interact with our society, right? In terms of our ability to actually move about in the society and feel safe. Really? It's bad for the dad every time because he has asthma. He's out of all who needs it. His O2 gets super low. Too much money being made. Yeah. They had 2 years to beef up healthcare and pay medical professionals what they're worth to keep them up, but they'd rather spend elsewhere. Yeah. No, and I mean, for God's sakes, like, America's going to get out of this pandemic and the healthcare system will still be privatized. Like, even as Joe Biden shows over and over and over again that he can change that at any moment, right? Like, they made it so that you can go in and be treated for COVID and not have it cost anything, right? So, we can erect a public model for COVID. Well, doesn't that mean we could erect a public model for basically anything, right? Why are we being selective about this? Pfizer and Moderna CEOs cashing in, buying additional yachts. Yeah, got to buy something, right? We don't know. And that's the thing that's really gross about what's going on with the billionaire class. They've run out of stuff to buy. They just don't know what to buy anymore, right? Like, so they're buying up the housing market because they're like, might as well. Like, they've got nothing left to buy. And they've got so much money and they've got such an overwhelming amount of market share that, like, they're completely distorting everything and bringing it down, which, incidentally, all of this predicted by Marx. Canadian beef imports halted by China over atypical mad cow disease. Well, we seem to have a thing with mad cow disease here in Canada. It seems like mad cow disease keeps coming around. And I gotta think that, like, our farming practices are probably having something to do with that. Like, it cannot be good for the cattle and for the birds and all this kind of stuff, to the way that we treat them. Like, it can't be good. Like, it's going to have, like, massive negative impacts. And I've talked to more than one person who thinks that, like, things like COVID, right, like, are directly tied to how we treat our animals. That, like, whether you think it was a lab leak or not, it certainly is like a leap from animals to humans. Like that's when we get really hit with shit, when there's a leap from animals to humans. And like, I just feel like we're creating a petri dish with our factory farming. Hey John, we had some sour interactions and comments I left on your vids, but I check your stream often. I definitely don't align with all your views, but you're a great conversationalist, host, and musician. Well, thank you. Thank you, Strifey. I appreciate that, but I don't expect everybody to agree with everything I say. I think that would be hysterically irrational of me to think so. And but the thing that matters to me the most is that people are hearing it. That and are understanding my position. That's really what matters to me the most. I don't need you to agree to everything I say. And I actually feel, and especially these last few weeks, there's been more than a couple of occasions where I'm seeing that the disagreements are what's building the strength. That as long as I am willing to admit when I'm wrong and capitulate on facts and evidence as facts and evidence are presented, like I'll say it over and over and over again. I don't care about being right. I care about the truth. And that to me is what I think is the strength of this channel and why I think this channel is going to grow. Because I don't care about being right. I've seen it over and over and over again. People who get caught in like, oh, you said this, but this is actually what's going on, and then they double down on it, and it turns into like a farce, right? And I refuse. I refuse. If you show me a piece of evidence that counteracts what I have been saying, I will change what I say, because facts don't care about your feelings. God, that's like literally the only thing that man has ever said that is actually accurate. Well, and I appreciate you. Honestly, Strifey, if we've had disagreements in the comments, like I don't recall them. Honestly, you seem like a cool guy or gal or whoever, right? You seem pretty rad yourself. I'm never wrong. Yeah, big brain time. Big brain time. Yeah, the documentary Food Inc. Yeah, exactly, Eric. That's a good documentary. Another good documentary is The Corporation. That I saw when I was really young. I think I was like 19 when I saw The Corporation, and it really was like, oh shit, yeah, like we're ruled by psychopaths for sure. And the I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, donate some money to my Patreon, right? All the bells, all the whistles. Tell people I exist. Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. One thing I'm actually not really looking forward to is I'm not looking forward to the chat getting more unwieldy, and hopefully I'll be the tools that I'll get when I hit 1,000 subscribers. Hopefully those tools will help with that, because I really enjoy the chat. That to me is like the thing that I love so much about doing this, is talking to you guys and having a back and forth and all of that. That to me is really the strength and the power of this. And so you see some streamers, they've just got like, it's all like a stream of consciousness, and it's all just like LOLs and like emojis and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just like, no, bro, no. Okay, bud, we've got somebody asking. You're awake. Come here. Wow! Whoa! Pugs in space. Pugs in space. Pugs in space. Pugs in space. Isn't that good? Thanks for swimming, buddy. Whoa. Come on. Oh, I know, buddy. Hack. I know. I know. Yeah. I know. I know. I picked you up and you hate that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Okay. This has been your Milo Pug Break. All right, buddy. You're going down. You're going down. You're going down. You're going down. I know. How dare I? How dare I? Why did I do that, Milo? Why did I do that? Because I'm a jerk. It has been a while, dude. It has been a while. I actually lengthened the amount of time that I kept him at my ex's for a little longer because I've been recording this audiobook and I know that he is going to be a problem with that. Even just he'll be on the couch and I'll be reading and then he'll go it's okay, stop, go back, delete, start again, right? So I know he's going to be difficult, but I kind of got to the point where I missed him. I was missing him. I was missing him quite a bit, actually. He is a little snorty guy, just sitting over there being so cute. Being so cute. This is something I wanted to show. I've showed this on the stream before, but Brian MD, I had an ankle fracture surgery cancel this morning because he couldn't afford his deductible. This guy will never run or walk without pain again. He will never work construction again. And he has insurance that he pays for. And he still can't afford his necessary surgery. I can't imagine. First of all, the victims of this, right? The populace itself that gets victimized by this. But what is it like to be a doctor in this? What is it like to be the surgeon? What is it like to be the nurse, right? Who constant, and it must be constant. You must see it all the time that people have insurance, right? They just don't have enough insurance, or they're just short, or they can't afford it, right? And you just have to, let them go, right? Isn't the Hippocratic Oath to first do no harm? Right? What is it like to be a doctor in this system? And it's got to be emotionally wearing. It's got to bring people down. It's got to be a problem for people. All right, guys, I'm going to go use the washroom very quickly. Here's from the Gravel Institute. Why are people hungry?
The world produces enough food to feed every person on the planet and then some. Yet 690 million people around the world go to bed hungry every night. And 25,000 people die of hunger every day. Even in the US, the richest country in the world, more than 12% of people experience hunger or food insecurity. If there's no shortage of food, how can this be? Blame capitalism. 10 greedy companies control and profit off of nearly all food production across the globe. And they don't produce food to feed people. They produce it for profit. Food, something we literally need to exist, is a commodity. If you don't have the money to buy it, that's your problem. Because these companies are only driven by profit, surplus food is thrown away. 72 billion pounds of food end up in landfills every year instead of on tables of people who are starving. Under capitalism, nobody cares if you go hungry.
Capitalism is unstable. Capitalism is unequal. And capitalism is fundamentally undemocratic.
I want people to make their own choices about how they live their lives, the professions they lead, where they want to work, and what they do. And capitalism offers that potential.
Slavery did it with
I
masses
actually
and
watched this. Capitalism versus Socialism, a Soho forum debate. the fellow who is arguing in favor of capitalism, he basically ends the whole thing by, like, because Richard Wolff's whole thing is co-ops, right? Cooperatives. He thinks everything should be restructured into cooperatives, which is like, okay. And the capitalist, his perspective was, well, then, like, people should be free to do that. You should do that. And he was, like, talking as if, like, bro, like, the capitalist class isn't going to let people do that, right? You can't just create, like, a cooperative version of Amazon, right? Amazon's not going to let you do that, right? It's like, it's like these individualists, like, they pretend as though there aren't antagonists, right? Like, that's the big thing, is that, like, they pretend as though there aren't people working against you, right? Like, it's, if all you've ever done your entire life is capitulate to the capitalist class and ascend the ranks of the capitalist class and just do what you're told and be obedient, right? If that's all you've ever done, then you can turn to people who the capitalists have crushed and antagonized and tell them just buck up. You can do it, right? And because this is what people are talking about when they talk about privilege, right? And how if you are privileged, you can't actually see what is happening in the world because you've never actually been confronted with antagonism. You've never actually been confronted with people who are attempting to enslave you, right? Or you're just fine with your enslavement. You're just like, yeah, whatever. I work for these guys. That's fine. There's so many stories of doctors where they hate the system so much because they have to let them go, and they have to quit their job because of it. Being a doctor in the system is pretty damn good. We're talking about $25,000 a year minimum, but, like, what's the cost of your soul, right? What's the cost of your soul? How much do they have to pay you to watch your society degrade and destroy? Hey, Just JC, how you doing? Oh, I better be careful what I say. JC's in the chat. They changed the number since last time. Yeah, I just had the debate with the capitalists earlier today about how there's a structural issue to establish worker co-op, and the guy was like, nah, it is easier, and those are capitalist enterprise, and all capitalism is voluntary exchange. Yikes, yeah. All capitalism is voluntary exchange, right? Yep, you get the choice between working for capitalists or starving. Well, that's your choice, right? Work or starve. And that's called liberty. Like, that's called freedom, right? When we talk about income and wealth inequality in America today, this is what we're talking about. Right now, the two wealthiest people own more wealth than the bottom 40%. Got that? Two people own more wealth than 40% of our people. Is that remotely acceptable to you? Like, Erica, I do think, I think that there is a, like, the capitalists and the defenders of capitalism, they need to retreat into this form of delusion. Because everybody wants to believe that they're the good guy. Everyone wants to believe that they're on the side of good. That they're working for the good and the betterment of everything. And people will dwell in these absolute delusions about their society until it's undeniable, until they get confronted with it. And for many people, they have to be confronted with it in their own life personally. They can't be told about it. They can't be shown it. They literally have to themselves be victimized by it before they will admit that it exists. And it's just, and it all boils down to, like, people have to believe, of course, capitalism is a voluntary exchange, because if they realize that it's actually a slave system, because it is, right, then they would at least feel bad about it, right? Like, capitalism is not a voluntary exchange. That instead of the capitalists owning people directly, they just own the market that everybody works in. That's it. Like, that's it. And capitalists cannot talk about that, right? Like the National Post and the Financial Post just did like this whole thing about the Capitalist Manifesto, and they refused to, and you have to call it a refusal, right? Because you got to be stupid not to know about this. They refused to talk about the relationship between labor and capital, which is like the defining characteristic of what capitalism is. That there is a ownership class that owns everything, and a labor force that works for them. And instead of the form of slavery being, instead of it being a form of slavery where you are owned directly by a person, by a capitalist, you are owned by a system, which the system is owned by the capitalists, right? It's a labor market. They've commodified you. You are a commodity. And this is called freedom and liberty and all that kind of shit. I prefer council democracy like in the Soviet Union, though maybe there should be more than one candidate. Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting about the Soviet Union and what happened with Stalin, right? And like, Stalin was clearly a strong man, for sure. But like, I do think that one of the failings of the Soviet structure was that it didn't allow for genuine debate and disagreements. Like, it's pretty obvious that if there were disagreements in regards to who got to be in positions of power, that the losers would be thrown out of the party. And nothing like the relationship between Trotsky and Stalin is like completely emblematic of that. And it's pretty clear that that is a way to weaken the Union, ultimately. That instead of having disagreements or having like a power contest that then resolves itself, and then the loser of the contest still being part of the wider body and still participating in the larger project, that those people get banished or purged, if you prefer. And that seems to weaken the structure in the long term, right? Like, the communist project of the Soviet Union doesn't really survive much longer past Stalin. And I think that is by and large because figures like Trotsky, and other figures get thrown out of the system after a loss of a power struggle. And instead the system should be such that power struggles, once they are resolved, the loser of the contest remains within the party, right? Like, it's pretty clear that Trotsky was like pro-Soviet Union. Like, it's pretty, like, you can critique what you like about Trotsky, but like, he definitely wanted the best for the Soviet Union, right? Like, he fought for the Soviet Union. Like, he like, if anybody is responsible for the revolution, right? Trotsky is completely involved in all of that. And so I've always said that it's such a shame that those two couldn't reconcile their differences. That once the power struggle came to an end, Stalin was more than happy to be rid of Trotsky. And Trotsky felt that he needed to flee the Soviet Union, and it doesn't look like there was even an attempt at reunification or a reconnection for the greater good of the Soviet Union, right? Which I think ultimately weakens it. And it looks to me as though this is a lesson that the Chinese Communist Party works really hard to resolve. That There are obviously internal power struggles within the Communist Party. Like, that's obviously the case. But, like, no, it doesn't look like anyone's ever been banished, right? It doesn't look like there's like, I'm happy to be corrected on this, but, like, there isn't, like, a schism, like what happened between Stalin and Trotsky, right? And so there's I mean, there's a lot, like, Stalin at the end of the day, like, he was the better politician for sure, but it's also pretty apparent that he didn't really have, or at least he didn't understand how to continue this project past himself, which is common. Like, it's more often than not that when a leader dies, the project that he was kind of holding together seems to fall apart. Yeah, you can be a commodity for one capitalist, or you could be a commodity for another capitalist, or maybe you want to work for a third capitalist. That's such freedom, yeah? Flip burgers at Wendy's, flip burgers at McDonald's, right? Like, it's freedom. I've been interacting in our anti-work and people just don't get it. They think that if they had the right employer, things would be better, but the social relations stay the same. Yeah, our anti-work is largely anarchist, right? And, like, I've been banned in our anti-work because I'm a communist. Straight up. Like, my very first interaction in our anti-work got me banned because I'm a communist. And it's so, like, they said, we don't take authoritarians here. And I literally was like, isn't what you're doing, like, the most authoritarian thing possible? Like, you're literally banning me because of my political affiliation or my political position. Anyway. And yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, they just, like, most of what happens in our anti-work looks like we just need incremental reform. Incremental reform, right? Like, they don't really want, like, they will be, and this is exactly what I was talking about earlier with FDR, right? Like, these are the types of people who, once someone like FDR starts to capitulate, they'll just go back to work, right? Like, that's what's going to happen with these guys, and it's pretty clear, like, that's the case. Many Canadian millennials will never own a home. This to me really shows you how psychotic the structure has become. Because, like, the class that you should be protecting, like, if you're a capitalist, the class that you should be protecting, without a doubt, are, like, your doctors and lawyers and engineers, right? Like, those are the people who should get everything, because they work incredibly long hours. They capitulate everything to the capitalist death cult, right? They don't get a life. Their profession, their job is their life, right? And if you betray them, right, like this is how psychotic the capitalist structure has become, is that it's even willing to betray the people who are traditionally its most virulent supporters, right? Because the project is now about wealth extraction, and they don't care anymore who they extract that wealth from. Like, they simply don't care. And, like, the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers, right, and the professors and all these guys, like, they're going to get abandoned too. Like, all of that is going to be it's going to be completely extracted. And that's what we're seeing with this housing crisis, is that, like, the issue is that the psychotic billionaire class is buying up all the housing. That's the issue. And its corporate media refuses to acknowledge it in serious ways, right? Or what will happen is you'll get, like, a story where they'll be like, here are the reasons why the housing market's going crazy. And they'll, like, do a whole bunch, like a laundry list of things. And they'll put, like, first and foremost, Immigration. Yeah, it's the immigrants. Yeah, it's the immigration. Yeah, that's the problem. And then they'll bury in like page 5, chapter 53, a one-liner about how like, oh yeah, by the way, the billionaire class owns 30% of the market. Just moving on from that, right? Like they'll like literally like, and it'll be phrased in like a really like, the Equitable Loan Association shows that the top percentile of the formative country's earning proposition owns a share of a percentage that is equal to the rate of the GDP of the nation of Africa. And you're like, what? But when you actually like decipher what they're saying, it's like, oh, the billionaire class owns like 30 to 40% of the market. And they're just sitting on it. And they just won't report on like empty houses or any of this shit. Ugh. And then also there's like a certain degree of the housing market that is used literally for money laundering, right? You literally have like criminal cartels just buying and flipping houses in order to launder their money. And like it's anywhere between 10 and 20% of the market that's taken up by that activity. So you've got like 20 to 30% of the market owned by the billionaire class, and then another 10 to 20% of the market. Like, so who's actually getting access to houses in all of this, right? Like, who's actually getting to live in any of these houses? Nope, sorry. And then the response is, well, we'll put a 1% tax on it. That's right. If you have an empty house, it'll be a 1% tax. As if that fucking matters at all. Like, these people have billions of dollars. Like, that's what's shocking to me. Like, what's shocking to me is, like, the populace is pushing on the political class so hard, and the political class is obviously coming out with total fucking bullshit. Like, what they're saying is obvious bullshit. Like, obvious. A 1% tax. You've got to be a total fucking moron to think that that's going to do anything. Like, oh no, this house, instead of being worth $100,000, instead of having to pay $100,000, I have to pay $100,000 and $1,000. Even if it's like $100,000 and $10,000, fucking make it $200,000. Make it $1 million. Make it $2 million. Make it $5 million. Make it $10 million. They have $1 billion. They don't care. You can make it as high as you want. You can make whatever tax you like. You can put whatever price tag you like on it. You have a billionaire that has run out of things to buy. They don't give a shit about a 1% tax. Yep. That's exactly right, Grinning. 1% is just the government getting their pound of flesh, not an effort to change the social relations. Well, and also, if they do it, and enough of these fucking gullible, rube-ish liberals are like, oh, look, they did something. That means that they genuinely care about me and my interests. They're really listening to me. Like, if it works, right? This is what I always say about the liberals. Like, why shouldn't you lie? Right? It works. Right? We're obviously gullible. We'll believe any narrative we're told. We'll do anything for anyone. And then also say of people who are struggling, oh, just sell yourself more to the capitalists. Like, that's literally what we do. And so if it works, like, why stop? Right? Like, is there any evidence on the table at all that the Canadian populace will suddenly go, wait a minute, I think these liberals are not telling us the truth. I'm gonna vote for another party. Like, is there any evidence that shows that that's the case? No, not really. In the U.S., the wealthy are buying up all the farmland. Yeah, actually very scary for future food production. Yeah, the number one farmer in America right now is Bill Gates. Which is like, yeah, right, like well-known agricultural farmer Bill Gates, right? Like, they don't know what to buy. That's really what it's come down to. Like, they don't know what else to buy. And so, like, they're just buying up shit and then just being like, I guess I'm going to be the king. Right? Like, Bill Gates and his family are going to be, like, kings. Like, like they literally are gonna like own all their farmland. They're gonna have serfs working on their farms, right? Like, yeah, feudalism 1.0 or 2.0 maybe. Call it 2.0.
Well, no, it's not feudalism. Because if the farmer doesn't like working for the owner, he can go work for another owner. Ha ha! Freedom!
Right? And like, we're so fucking gullible that people actually look at that and go like, yeah, wait a minute, that's true. Yeah, if you don't like working for that master, you can go work for another master, and that's freedom. Like, we're beyond stupid. Like, it's past stupid. Like, I don't know what word to use for this level of gullibility and stupidity, right? But we're definitely there. Like it's like a childish sort of like naive belief. Like we don't call a kid who believes in Santa Claus stupid or gullible, right? Like, we don't. Because we sort of expect a kid to not have the capacity to understand that, okay, Santa's not real, right? And like, we kind of get that they like grow out of it eventually, right? And it's like that. So what's the word for that? Right? What's the word for just like believing that something is real when it clearly isn't, because you don't actually have the sort of capacity to understand it could be otherwise, right? Like, all your parents are saying Santa is real, right? Everybody around you is acting like Santa is real, and come Christmas, there's gifts and shit. Like, all the evidence is there, and clearly these people, like, why would these people lie to you about this, right? And so it's like, what's the word for that? And that's what it is. Like, it's closer to that. It's not that people are like, I'm a dumb idiot who believes that. Like, it is like, well, all the people that I've been told to trust, right? All of the institutions that I've been told to trust, and that my parents sent me into the educational systems. My parents told me to go get a degree. Like, the society told me to do all of this stuff. And so I did it, and like, so like, why should I not believe them, and like all of this kind of stuff. So it's like it's got that kind of same vibe about it, where like, yeah, we're just like not grown up, like immature, juvenile, underdeveloped. Yeah, we're just like not grown up, you know? And like, the people who are defending the system, like, a lot of them are just kind of underdeveloped, I guess, is the word. They just stopped growing, you know? They just gave themselves over to the system in kindergarten, and like, and the way that the system operates is it rewards obedience, right? Like, that's the only attribute that it's vetting for, is obedience. So as long as you're obedient, you are rewarded, right? And so you kind of stop developing, because all you do is obey. And you obey all the way through to grade 12, and then you graduate, and the ones who are the most obedient are the ones that get the best grades. And then that gets you into the best school, where you just continue being obedient, and you get the best grades, and then you get into the good job because you've shown that you're the most obedient, and then you just continue obeying. And then when people start to talk to you about like, hey, the system is in like free fall collapse and is abandoning like millions and millions and millions of people, the only response they have is, well, those people should have obeyed better, because that's all that person ever did, right? Like, and you can see that with like the people who are the most outspoken about it, which are like your Ben Shapiro's and your Jordan Petersons, right? Like, all they ever did was obey, right? It's all they've ever done. They've just obeyed the power structure, and now they're there, and the only response that they have is, well, you should have obeyed better. Forget about the legitimacy of the system itself, which they deny the existence of the system, right? And so it is like a form of underdevelopment, implicit bias. But let's before I start even commenting on that, let's get our definitions straight. To describe when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. Yeah. There's something on that. Because it really is that they just haven't even thought about it, you know? That like they just got put on this path and they just obeyed because they were told to. And the people who deviate from that, i.e. the people who actually use their brain and create a conscious opinion about what's going on, those people get thrown out of the system, right? It's the people who are just like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, yes, sir. Like, those are the people who are rewarded. And that doesn't require, like, an actual active conscious thought, right? Like, I suppose that's why these people are called reactionaries, right? Because they're not actually actively putting anything forward. They're just reacting to what's going on, right? Like, they don't actually have like a fundamental core belief system. They don't actually have like something that they've actually actively thought about or pursued. They're just reacting to what's happening. Kindergarten was socialist. You learned to share, and you couldn't have a snack unless you brought enough for the whole class and had nap time. Yeah. And then we work as hard as we can to distill that out of you. Like, you got to create that foundation, right? So that you can work them away from it. The other thing that people like Jordan Peterson does is they will have this Calvinist view of where human nature is evil, can't do good. Yeah. I've noticed that about Peterson, especially when he talks about global warming and like all of it. Like he genuinely thinks that we can't come together as a people and actually solve this, right? Which, I mean, is kind of like, yeah, it makes sense why our society is in like this collapse, right? Like, even if you believed that human nature is evil, like, you should think that it's like in its evil self-interest it would be able to cooperate, right? And of course, like, it's easy to be a Calvinist if you're rich. Like, straight up, it's easy to be a Calvinist if you're rich. Like, yes, human nature is evil, so my evil actions are in some way justified, right? Like, you can just sort of shrug and be like, yeah, the evil that exists in the world, what are you going to do about it? And it's easy to be that way if you're rich and comfortable and obedient to the system, you know? And in many ways, it's a very convenient view. It's a very convenient position. I think that way about meritocracy, too. Like, it's very convenient, right? It's a very convenient position for someone who's only ever obeyed the system to stand up and say, I'm here because I'm the best, right? Like, it's very convenient. FICO Thorn. Don't know if I've ever seen you here. FICO Thorn. I love that name. That's a cool name. I feel like you're a dude with like a shotgun gonna go fight goblins and shit. You know? FICO Thorn. Human nature is evil, and the mainstream media and tech giants are doing all they can to make sure it is. I don't believe that human nature is evil. I don't. Like, I think that there is, like, I mean, you're right about this. The mainstream and the tech giants are doing all they can to make sure it is. But, like, human nature itself, first of all, concepts like good and evil, I like. All right, I honestly don't care to get down to that. Like, there's a whole philosophical discussion about, well, what is good and what is evil? Do these things even exist? All that kind of stuff. And like that's one thing. No, I know. But it's just it's taking me on a tangent. That's all. It's easy to get me to go on a tangent, FICO Thorn. I gotta say it again, dude. Your name is so kick-ass. FICO Thorn. Just like, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of ass. Yeah. Can we stop calling it a labor shortage? People don't want to work shit jobs for shit money during a global pandemic while the 1% get even richer. We are entering the find out phase of economics. I personally hope it ends like the French Revolution. Oh yeah, I do love the metaphysical. If you want to derail this chat, you just start talking about like quantum mechanics or theology or any of that kind of stuff. I love to frustrate people because I genuinely do call myself, and I'm quite serious about this, I am a secular theologian, right? If that doesn't piss you off, then I don't know what will. Yeah, there are major differences in human behavior depending on the time and location. Can it be simplified down into a monolithic human nature? And I genuinely do feel that the people who are attempting to simplify it down into a monolithic human nature are doing so for their own benefit, right? It's very convenient to say that humans are evil if you're the wealthy person benefiting from the structure of the system, so that you can kind of just shrug and ignore the evil that the system does and just say, well, that's human nature for you. Oh, waka, waka, waka. And it does work the other direction, right? Like it's kind of convenient to say that, well, human nature is good if you yourself are in a position where you benefit from the idea that humans can do good, right? And so I find the whole conversation to be one that has a lot of kind of bias in it, you know? That if you benefit from the idea that humans are evil, then you will likely believe that. And if you benefit from the idea that humans are good, then you'll likely believe that. And I kind of look at it and I kind of go, well, humans are capable of both. And a lot of it depends on the circumstances. I will say this, that time and time again, we can see that when humans are thrown into stressful situations with one another, they typically bind together and fight as a unit. That's typically what happens, which I guess is more closely aligned with good than it is with evil. That the narrative of there's the story of the Lord of the Flies, right? Young boys get abandoned on an island and it dissolves into chaos, right? Well, these 6 situations have happened in the past, right? Where young boys have been abandoned on an island in that way, right? And instead of it devolving into chaos, they came together, bound together, and worked together to survive the difficulties, right? So it's like this sort of narrative that says that it all devolves into chaos. Well, our own history sort of shows that's not the case. The trouble seems to come in when one group of people claim that they have ownership over another, or even ownership over property, right? That seems to be the problem, is this belief. I always find this really funny, that creatures who are by definition randomly generated and completely temporal believe that they own something. All right. All right. I've always thought that that's weird. You're completely randomly generated. You don't know where you're going to start. You don't have any control over where you're going to start. You're just there. You're only here for a very brief period of time. And yet, if you put money, something we invented, right, that doesn't exist, it's literally just a concept. But if you take some of it and put it on the table, someone will give you a piece of paper that says you own a parcel of land that will be here, that was here before you got here and will continue to be here after you're gone. And so, at best, you can make the claim that you are renting it. Or that you, have, ownership of it. You have the right to declare what happens on that land. within a like certain degree. And it's like, oh, simulation theory. I love that. I do actually. I really do love like the idea that this is all just a simulation, and like, but like what would be the difference between like this is just a simulation and like a being created it? Like to me, simulation theory doesn't actually have that much. Like, it's not out of step with theology that much. It just uses like technology language. You know what I mean? Like, it's just using this sort of like techno language to describe it instead of like theological language. But it seems like, for real, like I always say to people who are about simulation theory, oh yeah, you should read Augustus. You should read Aquinas. You should read Isaac Newton. You should read these things, because you're going to find that what they wrote about the nature of reality and the nature of God aligns pretty closely to what the simulation theorists are talking about. Milo, buddy, you have had more than enough peanut butter, dude. You have had so much peanut butter. Is there any peanut butter left in here? There's a little peanut butter left in here. That's it for you, dude. You've had so much. I let him get away with so much on the first few days. Like, when he comes back, I just like all the peanut butter I can give him and all that kind of stuff. And he knows it, and he's taking advantage of it. It's completely how like a little kid will like play parents off of each other if they're divorced. It's completely like that. Oh yeah, the Buddhists too, for sure. No. My background is Christianity, so I know like more about it. But like the Buddhists are like that too. The Hindus. Even like the Taoists or Taoists, if you prefer, the Confucianists, like all of that shit. No, all of these religions, when it comes to like the nature of reality and the nature of God, like they're all striking at the same sort of idea, that this is a singular energy, right? That we all exist like at the behest of this singular creative force. That this is all like something of an illusion that exists. For us to attempt to communicate with one another and discover the purpose of our reality, right? And I like to take it, one thing that I actually disagree with most of the theologians about is that they always present things as if the energy knows what's going on. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think the energy does know what's going on. Like, maybe the energy knows what's going on in like the largest, widest possible meta sense imaginable. But like in the immediate, in the right now, in this sort of procedure of creation and us all going through it together as the temporal beings that we are, I don't think the creative energy really knows what's going on either. Like, I think it relies on us to have those discussions and try to find out, right? That's what I think it is. And then like in a large, so maybe it's like in a large sense it does figure that all out. And then it comes back down into sort of the temporal sort of thing, because it's a much larger thing than we are. But like, it requires us to experience it, and it requires itself to experience itself through us to make these discoveries for it to realize that in the first place. And so I don't think it knows what's going on either. I just think it's here, and it created us because it has to. Right? It's like a creative force, and it just creates all things that are logically possible because it can. And so it just does. And then here it is. And then it's like, what did I make? What is this? And like, that's what's happening. That like, the theologians often talk about God as if it's like, and then God waved a hand and created this and that, and with all of the love and knowledge. And I don't think so. I really do think that like, the creative force just created it because it was possible to, and it was almost incidental. That like literally it like came to sentience and it just went, oh, what can I do? And it just, in the asking of that question, just created all things that are logically possible to be created. And only afterwards it was like, well, what is all this? What's this evil? What's this good? Like, what is all this that everybody's talking about? And it's only through actually going through the process of existing as those things on a one-to-one basis that it can find out what the fuck is going on. And of course, it's going to experience things that are well outside of what we would call even experiential, right? Like it is going to exist as a light wave. Like, what is that even? And you're just like, but like this, I love thinking about this way, that it doesn't actually know what's going on, right? It is as much a victim of circumstance as we are. And in a way, that's actually quite terrifying. It's quite terrifying to think of the universe this way, that there truly is no one in control. Like, not even the creative force itself is actually in control of what's going on, right? And honestly, like, as I say this, like, if I die and I do enter like some kind of pearly gate situation, I meet my creator, and then my creator goes, John, I know what's going on. I'll be like, okay, great. Like, I absolutely will capitulate. I'm not gonna, like, this is not a hill that I will die on, okay? But like, I just can't help but think this way. Like, I can't help but feel that, like, there is no way that the creative energy that created all of this knows what's going on. Like, there's just no way that's the case. It's trying to figure it out too, right? It's too much fucking ridiculous nonsense. Green guy, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Lord of the Rings. Haven't seen. Oh, hold on. Somebody's. They think they're stewards of Gondor. Yeah. You sound very much like an LSD on our view of God and the creation of His world. I mean, I've done LSD a couple of times, and I'm not particularly convinced that LSD is actually as helpful as the people who do LSD think it is, right? Like, it's something that I'm like, yeah, you can have some fun with it, go to town, but like, I think that like meditation, contemplation, and prayer are probably more important, right? Uh-oh, did I stumble into something? Oh, you said LDS. Uh-oh, did I just admit something? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. You guys knew this. Are you familiar with Donald Hoffman? I'm not. But his view that we are incapable of seeing reality as it is, that it only exists where consciousness exists, just like a simulation. Yeah, nobody's in control. Yeah. That's hilarious. I just started talking about LSD. You sound... Latter-day Saint. Yeah, I don't know that much about the Latter-day Saints outside of their commercials. Brought to you by the Church of Latter-day Saints, right? Like, no, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah. I love their commercials. Like, great commercials. You're talking about Latter-day Saints, and I'm like, yeah, like LSD, man. So I don't know, like, do some hits of LDS and do some hits of LSD. See which one you like. I think, you know what? I will talk about LSD a little bit more. I think that part of the problem that I had with LSD is that the guy that was introducing me to LSD wasn't doing it honestly. You know, like, he wasn't like he was trying to manipulate me. He was he used drugs as a way to manipulate people around him to lower their defenses so that he could manipulate people into doing things for him. Which is, yeah, it's as disgusting as you think it is. And so it's really, really tainted my relationship with LSD. And I've always wanted to try it again outside of that. I've done mushrooms since, and that's actually been really lovely. Like, low-dose mushroom trips are the best. They're super the best. Like, everybody should do, like, a low-dose mushroom trip, like, every so often. It's just so nice. It, like, reconnects you to the world. Like, you feel more part of the thing. You feel less isolated. Like, I think that there are benefits to it for sure. And we're also finding medical benefits. Like, people who do like mushroom trips are finding that it's helping them get over their PTSD, that kind of stuff. And leave it to mushrooms, right? Mushrooms just being like, hey, just eat me, and you'll feel more connected to everything. It's great. It's great. Mushrooms are great, dude. Mushrooms are great. Just really fucking happy to be here. if everyone did shrooms at least once, we'd be in such a better place. I actually do like think that there's truth to that. Like, because like part of the psychedelic experience is just that it opens up, like, there are people walking around who like literally do not think of anything outside of their skin. Like, they literally can't see past their own skin, right? And like, they need to just kind of get a larger connection to something, right? They need to, and they need to get out of their fucking head, you know? Like, this shit I've got behind me, right? Like, that's not there for just decoration, right? Like, we live in a body, right? And that body actually has so much more control over us than we like to admit. We genuinely think of ourselves as like a brain floating in like a mechanical robot. That's really how we think about ourselves as a culture. And it's so not the truth that our body is more responsible for how we are and how we act and what we think than our brain is. Like, our brain is like a central processing unit, but the body is what's taking in all of the information, right? Like, what you feel and what you hear and what you sense, right? Like, that has so much more to do with how you're acting in the world than what you see with your eyes or what you think with your brain, right? Like, and there are all kinds of like things that I think affect us that we don't really genuinely talk about, right? Like, I recently had a conversation with somebody who's like really into astrology. And I'm not like really into astrology. Like, I don't really buy in too hard into astrology. I think it's kind of fun. But like, they said something to me that has really stuck with me. And I really have been thinking about it more and more. Which is like, yeah, astrology is just sort of charting the moon, right? And charting the planetary forces. And like, the moon is responsible for the tides. Like, it literally moves the entire ocean. And you're telling me it's having no effect whatsoever on you? I think you're nuts. And it's like, I stopped and I thought about that. And I was like, yeah, that's a really, really fucking good point. Like, we are anywhere between 70 to 90% water, depending on who you talk to, right? But everybody agrees that we're at least like 70% water. Like, we're mainly water. And here's a fucking planetary body that's moving the ocean, right? The largest body of water that exists, right? The Earth is mainly ocean, right? And here's an orbiting thing that is moving the ocean. Yeah, I can buy into the idea that would also have an effect on me somehow, right? Do I know how? No. But yeah, I can sort of buy into that idea. You know, and if somebody walked up to me and is like, oh, the moon is in the waning gibbous of Mars, so that will mean you're more affected by chocolate. I'd be like, all right, that sounds like nonsense to me, but I don't know. Like, I haven't looked into it. I don't know anything about it. Yeah, our tears are salt water. Exactly. So it's like, well, and you're raising something interesting here, actually, Grinning. There's a few communists on YouTube that criticize drug usage, but they don't understand that sometimes that's the only healthcare we have. Communism itself, traditionally, is there's going to be a very interesting conversation within communists and communist communities that I hope to be a part of at some point, which is the validity of drug usage, the validity of things like pornography, right? These sorts of things. And communism traditionally has been very anti that because it views stuff like pornography and drug usage as tools of the bourgeois class, of ways to consistently abuse and use workers. And that if we actually did have like worker control and it was a worker society, well, then things like drugs and pornography would not be necessary because we would be fulfilled in other ways. Like we wouldn't need something like drug use because we would have a deeper connection to our spiritual self. Like you wouldn't need to take mushrooms because that sensation that you get from mushrooms, you could also get somewhere else. I am of two minds. Like I see what they say, I see what they're saying, but I also think that like, nah, bro, like mushrooms are there. Like that literally the ground itself is spitting them out at us. Like, and you pick it up and you eat it and you have a good time. Like I don't think I can ignore that. Right? I can't just ignore the fact that the earth is spitting drugs in our face. You know? Like, it's not like we manufactured it. It's not like LSD. Like, LSD is manufactured. And I can really respect why someone would be like, no thanks. Like, that came from a lab, and it's, like, hyper-condensed in order to really fuck with you. But, like, that doesn't hold true for something like marijuana, for example. Like, marijuana literally grows out of the ground. Like, you can't stop it from doing that. It's gonna do that. Right? And it's the same thing with like mushrooms. It's just like spitting out of the ground. You're just like, okay, like what are you going to do about it? Nah, nothing. Like, so I get why people are opposed to drug use from a like societal control sort of aspect and the idea that there is a concern that people are using drugs as a way. Yeah, I'm with you on this, Ezial. Like, I'm not a fundamentalist, I think is what it comes down to, right? And boy, does that ever piss people off. I've learned nothing pisses off people more than saying you're not a fundamentalist about something. Overtime tonight, yeah, I don't know, pissed off. Sometimes I do it. I'm just liking it. Oh yeah, like, Rogan is such an interesting figure in this way. Like, sometimes he just has a podcast that you can't fucking ignore. Like, you can't. And, like, the Robert Malone podcast, you can't ignore that. Like, you can't just say, like, well, Joe Rogan, I don't care for Joe Rogan, right? It doesn't, sorry, dude. Like, the Robert Malone podcast is a real important podcast, and you can really thank Joe Rogan for it. And you can't really ignore Joe Rogan because he's got, like, 11 million viewers. The number one network show on television, news show right now, is Tucker Carlson. He gets 3 million viewers. Right? Joe Rogan gets 11 million. Like, you can't ignore him. Like, you can't ignore him. And you know, it's kind of annoying sometimes because, like, Rogan's got some pretty gnarly takes, and I do think he's a transphobe. Like, cut and dry. Like, I think he's a straight-up transphobe. But, like, you know, he's also platforming people like Abby Martin. He's also platforming people like Bernie Sanders. And then he turns around and platforms somebody like Ben Shapiro. And you're like supposed to take that fucking seriously. It's like, okay, bud. Don't forget the mescaline. Ancient cultures use psychedelics as a means of guidance, particularly South American tribes and ayahuasca, which is still going on. DMT is literally a neurotransmitter we use to hallucinate our reality. Carl Jung was into everything. No subject was taboo to him, and astrology became a defining feature of his theory of archetypes. I equate Joe Rogan with whoever the guest is. When it was Oliver Stone the other day, it was great. If he has on Ben Shapiro, I don't listen. Well, and like, what I do appreciate about, and the reason why I call him a transphobe, by the way, like Rogan's position has always been, I will have on controversial right-wing figures, and then I will also have on controversial left-wing figures, and hopefully this will create a conversation that breaks through the echo chamber, right? I value that he is attempting to prevent echo chambers, that like he wants these voices to interact with one another, and his theory is that good voices will defeat bad voices. That's really like his prevailing sort of theory. Is that true? You know, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I am more or less of the opinion that there is such a thing as like a take that should get you fucking silenced, right? Like if you stand up and say we should round up the Jews, we all agree, nope. Like you're done, right? Like you're done if you're walking around saying that. And like if you platform a person so that they can say something like that, you should be done, right? But like, but is it true? Is the big question, right? Does it actually work that way, right? Like if you let Nazis talk, does it, and then you talk back to the Nazi, does that actually defeat the Nazis? Well, the Nazis didn't think so. Like, honestly, the Nazis didn't think so. The Nazis were super happy that you tried this against them. There's lots of writing from Nazi writers who are like, yeah, they debate us. It's hilarious, right? Like, and the Nazis would say outright, yeah, the only way you're going to stop us is if you smash us. Like, physically smash us. They said that of themselves. They were super happy that the fucking liberals and the socialists and the communists were trying to debate them. And they were happy to be frustrating. They were happy to like obfuscate and be difficult, right? They weren't interested in the truth. They were trying to eliminate a race of people, right? So does this theory work when it comes to like fucking Nazis? The Nazis didn't think so. And the reason why I ultimately call Joe Rogan a transphobe is because he doesn't abide by this theory in regards to the trans conversation. That he has happily platformed like TERFs and far-right speakers and some like some theorists, like some people who I would call like centrists who are just interested in like the actual physical like truth of it and all that, and that's fine. He has never, ever, ever platformed an actual trans rights activist. He's never, ever platformed anybody who is on the left of the conversation saying, this is what's going on with trans people, this is what we think, this is the kind of thing. He's never done it. And so it's like, well, that's something a fucking transphobe would do. So he defies his own central thesis in order to platform like people on the far right of the conversation, but he won't platform people on the left of it. So what do you call a person who does that? And if he wants to not be called a transphobe, then platforming an actual trans rights activist and having that conversation, right? I think that would be important to do. The paradox of being intolerant to the tolerant. Yeah. I actually don't like that. Is that Carl Polanyi that said this? The paradox of the tolerant being intolerant to the tolerant. I don't see it as a paradox. Like, I don't. Like, that's a fun way of framing it. Like, it's a fun little device and all that kind of stuff. But I don't like. There's no paradox. The rules of our society are very simply, if you pass a law, it should apply to everyone. It should be universal, right? That if a rich person breaks the law, if a white person, if a black person, if a Christian, if a Hindu, like if they break that law, they are punished equally. That's the whole idea, right? Well, along come the Nazis, and they say, we would like to eradicate a person based on their race. So they want to pass a law that applies to a certain group of person, or they want to act against a certain group of people in a way that is not universal. They want to exclude them based on their race or political affiliation, right? And what we say to the people who stand up and say that they want to do that is, oh, very well, you want to punish people based on their race or ideological position, so we will do that to Nazis. So we're not being paradoxical. We are, in fact, fulfilling the wishes of the Nazis. We're just doing it to Nazis. That's all. There's no paradox. I disagree with you, though, because there was propaganda. They actually censored everyone but Nazis. I don't think I understand the comment, but sorry. Yeah, Karl Popper, that's right. I'm actually reevaluating my position on free, unlimited speech. Many USers are flat out irresponsible and hurt more than help. Well, like, here's a real basic example, right? Like, if you stand up and scream fire in the middle of a hall and cause a panic and have everybody run out of the building, right? That's not protected speech. It's not free speech, right? And even the United States thinks that that's the case, right? Even the United States thinks that's the case. So no one, every single nation understands that there is such a thing to a limit. There are limits on speech, and that speech can be used, right? And for example, there is such a thing called inciting violence, right? That if you verbally abuse people and try to start acts of violence, like, this is why it matters. If you're like insulting and shitting on somebody and then they punch you in the face, well, people think like, aha, the guy that punched you in the face, he's the guy that's in trouble. But most legal systems will be like, what? You were like badgering him, insulting him, going after him, and then he lashed out against you. Like, looks like you were inciting violence, bud. Like, inciting violence already exists, even in the United States. So when Nazis stand up and say, it's my freedom of speech to say we should round up the Jews and kill them. Well, no, it's not. You're inciting violence. Like, straight up, it's not protected speech. It simply isn't, right? It's just an idiot preying on morons, right?
Yeah, I get that. True, you know, free speech.
No. Even the United States understands the concept of inciting violence. I think I am going to close it down, guys. I love talking to you guys. But I got other work to do. I got other shit that I need to get done. And I got to put this pug to bed. I got to do that. Yeah. But fear-mongering on immigration isn't the same as fire in a theater. I mean, like... Anyway. I got to stop. You guys come on back. We'll continue that conversation tomorrow. Always remember, guys... Each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the pale hope that you won't realize that fact. Don't let them. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.